Battlehosts. Be a better gamer, build a better community.
Welcome to Battlehosts, a podcast, a website dedicated to helping you become a better 40K gamer and to build a better community of players. I'm your host, Mark, and with me tonight is Sean.
Hello.
And Matt.
How do fish say hello underwater?
I don't know. Do you think the Tau...
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, that's somebody trying to say hello underwater, not a fish.
Yeah, I imagine fish don't say anything. Are Tau fish people? Do we know? Have we confirmed that? They have kind of a fishy sort of...
Well, all the names of all their stuff, devilfish and mantas and piranhas and...
I guess the Imperium view them as fish because they're blue, I suppose.
Which means they're fish because the Imperium is correct.
The Imperium
I'm not hearing heresy from you, am I?
they do write the history, I suppose, of the universe.
Because the Imperium is the one that named all those things, right?
Yeah.
Because everything else, they name it. It's like XV8 Crisis Suit and XV42.
True.
That's true.
And like, that looks like a Tetra to me. the Imperium is, I think the Imperium gave him the fish designation.
I think so, but they have cloven feet, which is weird. I guess it's just Tau. Tau are strange that way.
Yeah.
So maybe they're not fish, maybe they're water mammals.
Yeah, there we go.
Because dolphins are ungulates.
Yeah.
Horses are ungulates. Okay. Anyways, we're way in the weeds.
We have set a record for getting off on a cat track, the earliest in an episode.
You started
in
it.
the history of Battlehosts.
You just started. I could have went with it. But...
This is my fault. I did this. Yeah.
So speaking of getting off track and really great transitions, if you like what you hear, subscribe to us on iTunes. Catch all the latest episodes. By the way, I spent some time last week working on the podcast, and so obviously we're on iTunes, and we also have, I think, a Google Play, but we're also on Spotify. Mm-hmm. And for those of you that do not have Spotify, Spotify is one of the greatest membership. Spotify, Netflix, and Amazon Prime are the three things that I'm very happy to pay for every month. Spotify is amazing. So. Mm-hmm.
And we're not sponsored by any of those.
No.
Just to make it clear.
No. But we're on Spotify now. So we actually have quite a few people listening on Spotify. So, it actually was really easy to do, surprisingly. I feel like I probably should have done that sooner. But
very cool.
There you go. So we're on Spotify as well. You can also follow us on Facebook under the Battlehosts. And if you'd like to support the Battlehosts for as little as $1 a month, you can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/thebattlehosts where we did something else. I must have had time on the weekend, rarely, and created a Discord chat. So if you are a $3 a month member, you actually get access to our Discord chat, which is like everything we do around here is starting small and it's kind of building. So we just have a couple people on there posting some stuff, but basically it's just a place for the listeners can go and just chat about the Battlehosts or just list ideas or hobby ideas or ideas for segments or whatever it is you want to talk about 40K related. Although I haven't have like a miscellaneous category. I suppose people can talk about life if they want to, but I don't.
There's a general chat.
There's a general chat. Sure, you can get nuts. You can talk about whatever you want. But
debate why Tower considered fish people.
It is true. Are they fish? Are they communists? Because somebody actually said they're not actually communists, and I'm like, I guess communism is kind of an economic thing, not a political. It's sort of. I'm like, what? You make a very good distinction there. So I believe the everyone kind of says, oh, they're fish communists, and I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe there's a little more nuance there than we're not.
They're fish authoritarians.
Yeah, because it's not. Yeah, because we don't really know how they pay for things. Mm-hmm. I assume they all just do stuff and it just gets...
We joke how this is the NPR of 40K podcast, but I think we're getting too far into the NPR.
I want to know their biological basis and what kind of currency they use.
I feel like there is a market if GW really went into like deep lore into every single race of like how everything works. Oh man, people would buy those books.
Oh, totally.
What utilities does the Tau Empire provide its citizens? And do they have monopolies over said utilities?
Do they vote? These are questions I don't think they do. How do the ethereals agree on anything?
In-universe political philosophy discussions about the factions. Yeah, no, you could do it.
I feel like there's a book in there. There's some. Yeah, there's a ton of
like in-universe versions of the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, right? Like something like that. Some ancient historian laying it all out.
Good. Anyways, so in this episode, we're going to talk about Tau. In part one, we actually were pretty much more focused, and we talked about the history of Tau, the different Septs. We talked about our favorite Tau units. In this part, most of this podcast is dedicated to interviews. So we're interviewing both Val Heffelfinger and Sean Morgan, aka Abuse Puppy, about their experiences playing Tau competitively. Sean has been much more successful than Val, as you'll hear in the interviews. So they're two very different experiences, and I'll have those two interviews here coming up. And then we'll just kind of finish our discussion of Tau. We'll talk about a couple cool lists that we like, and then just how to get started with the army. So before we get started, let's hear a word from our sponsor, DGT.
We all love Warhammer 40K, but sometimes games just take too long. Using a game timer is the best way to make sure games finish and for both players to get an equal amount of time. Check out the Easy Game Timer from DGT, manufacturers and designers of the timers officially sanctioned by the International Chess Federation. It's simple to set up and customize, and your settings are saved when it's turned off. It's easy to use with a large moving lever for changing turns and a clear digital readout. It's the most affordable and high-quality game timer on the market and is the choice of most 40K events. Whether you want to practice before a big event or you just want to be a better player, the Easy Game Timer from DGT is the perfect game timer for your 40K events. The DGT Easy Game Timer is available from many online retailers. Wholesale pricing is also available for tournament organizers. Check these fine clocks out at dgtnorthamerica.com. Speed up your game and improve your play with the Easy Game Timer from DGT.
All right, so that's our sponsor, DGT. So let's jump into our first interview. This is with Mr. Sean Morgan, a.k.a. Abuse Puppy. With me tonight is Sean Morgan, a.k.a. Abuse Puppy. How are you doing, Sean?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. So we're here to talk Tau, but before we jump into Tau, you are on Chapter Tactics, but you also have your own podcast. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. It's called In the Finest Hour. The idea behind it was that we wanted a podcast that was maybe a little bit more compact, a little bit more focused than a lot of the ones that were out there.
Sure.
So our goal is to keep things to about an hour every month, or every week, I should say, and give players some fairly specific and kind of precise use things they can do that are going to help their game play out in very particular ways.
Yeah, and some of the topics and the subjects you have are actually I find really interesting. What are some of the interesting ones you just recorded? Like, do you have one that's coming up here pretty soon?
Yeah, we do actually. Probably by the time this comes out, it'll actually be released. But we just finished a second episode on a concept called tempo, which is not something a lot of players necessarily are familiar with, even though they probably experienced it in their games. It's the idea that, where and when on the battlefield the actual fights take place is actually one of the most important things that you can control.
Interesting.
And it's something that you see a lot of the top level players take huge advantage of. So it's actually our second episode on the subject because we felt it was something we really wanted to dip back into.
So it sounds like it's pitched to, or I mean, it feels like it's something that would be really good for newer players that are just starting to kind of try to get better at the game then.
Yeah, we try to present the topics in a way that anyone can potentially access, because anyone from like a very new player all the way up to someone who is quite experienced with the game can get a lot out of a new understanding of ways to access various kinds of topics.
Great. Sounds good. So let's talk about Tau. And when we recorded Eldar several months ago, many months ago, you mentioned, you had some thoughts about Tau, and Tau were fairly new at the time, and they've been out for almost a year now. So tell me about what are your thoughts on Tau? Like, where are Tau sitting right now as far as, a competitive army?
That's actually a really interesting question, because I think that maybe not more than any other book, but certainly towards the top, Tau are an army that is very divisive in the community, and including within the Tau community.
Yeah.
There are some Tau players who believe that the army is fantastic and some who think it's terrible and everything in between. So I think there's a lot of perspectives. Personally, I think that especially with the changes from Chapter Approved and the ITC updates and everything we've seen recently, I think Tau are a pretty strong army. They are probably not quite as good as, Yannari or some of the other really top end lists, but you can absolutely win major tournaments, and I have won a major tournament with Tau. So if you are interested in the faction, you like it, then I think it's something you can compete at the very top end of the game with.
No, that's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I think Matt mentioned in the podcast, sometimes being the best army, the way changes happen to the game and the way GW looks at things and decides, to balance it, Tower, and it's nice to be not top, but kind of right underneath it there. So you're not going to see any major nerfs to Tau, I don't imagine.
certainly not aimed at them. No, there definitely is a danger to being number one because everyone's out to get you.
Yep. Like the Castellan, for example.
Yes. Well, and that is another advantage of Tau is when people think about like, ooh, I've got to build to beat the very best armies out there. They're thinking about the Castellan and Ynnari and usually orcs and gene stealers and stuff like that. But Tau aren't on a lot of people's radars as like an army to beat. Yeah. Which can be an advantage of its own.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you talk about doing well at an event. You were at the Harvester and you won the Harvester with the Tau list.
I did, yes.
Yeah.
This was admittedly prior to the chapter approved changes and whatnot, but in my opinion, those changes only made Tau better.
Yeah.
So even though I'm not playing them as like a primary army currently, just because I want to focus on other things a little bit,
sure.
I think they are a very, very strong army.
Yeah. So I guess what does a competitive Tau list look like? What are some of the things you see typically in a list that would do well at an event?
That's actually interesting. There are, especially in the US meta, a lot of things that are very common to Tau lists, but we're starting to see some shifts in what people are bringing coming from overseas as well as kind of echoing out. But the basic features tend to be at least moderately common. Tau lists are very command point hungry, and they need 3 detachments to bring multiple commanders. So you're pretty much always seeing them run 3 different detachments, usually at least 2 battalions, and sometimes even more than that. I've personally run a Tau list with a brigade, a battalion, and another detachment.
Wow.
Just because like they can chew through an incredible number of command points very quickly.
Yeah.
That also helps that they have some very cheap and very effective HQ choices. The Cadre Fireblade being one of the most popular, but also just commanders are quite good. Ethereals, honestly, they don't have a lot of bad choices in the HQ slot. And their troops are also very cheap and very efficient. The basic strike team, kind of the core Tau troop choice, is extremely powerful at close ranges. It can, for a 7-point model, you can put out 3 strength 5 shots, which can be just backbreaking for a lot of armies. And they're a lot tougher than you tend to think with the 4-up armor and whatnot. So that really opens up the ability to bring different detachments for them.
Yeah, I mean, an Tau battalion is not that expensive. I mean, it's
not.
It's super cheap, actually.
One of the cheapest battalions in the game.
Yeah.
And they have, I believe, the cheapest brigade in the game.
Yeah.
Outside of that, they do have very good choices in pretty much every slot. The Firesight Marksman is a standalone character in your elite slot.
Oh, yeah.
It gives you a single marker light with character protection, which is fantastic to have. The Riptide, I'm sure everyone is familiar with. It's a big beefy battle suit that is really hard to kill and throws down an insane number of shots. Stealth suits, often kind of underestimated, but very resilient, able to deploy just about anywhere on the field. Obviously, drones you will see in abundance in most types of Tau lists because they're needed to protect all the battle suits.
Yeah, for sure.
And then broadsides, with their price reduction, are suddenly a very strong choice. You can get 16 shots out of a single model. It gets protected by drones. When you start throwing in rerolls from various sources and bonuses to hit and all that sort of thing, a unit of 3 broadsides can just absolutely obliterate anything it looks at.
So do you think Tau, I mean, it oftentimes they kind of build a castle or, like a gun line because, and it feels like a really efficient way to run them because of, the 6 inches, a lot of the 6-inch auras that they have. And it does put up a lot of shots, and you can hide the drones and you can protect a lot of your suits. But are there other ways to run Tau besides sitting in kind of a blob for 3 turns, or is that usually just the best way to do it?
That is one way to do it. But honestly, even like your top end Tau lists, if all you do is sit in your deployment zone, you'll lose. I guarantee it. But there are lots of other ways. I mentioned earlier that we're seeing some interesting lists coming from overseas, and honestly, some American players are running them as well. So it may not even be accurate to say that they're necessarily from overseas. But we're seeing a lot of people experimenting with lists that use a combination of Devilfish and a lot of strike teams.
Interesting. Okay.
I've seen as many as 120 strike team guys, although I think that is pushing well beyond what you really should be running.
It seems excessive, but that is a lot of strength 5 shots.
Yeah.
Sure.
By the same token, there was an Australian player who didn't end up making it to the event, but he is well known as a top-end player who was planning on bringing a list using 9 Devilfish to CanCon.
Wow.
And we've seen some American players bringing, I think, 6 and 7.
Yeah.
I have a list myself that I've been testing out that runs 7 Devilfish.
So how does a Devilfish work though? I guess, it's funny, like how does that list run? Like what makes the Devilfish, especially in quantities of 7 plus, what are they doing?
So the big failure point for a Tau list, the point at which a Tau list loses is when you don't get a shooting phase. And that typically happens because someone has locked one of your units in combat and tri-pointed it so that you cannot get away.
Mm-hmm.
When that happens, there is a very good chance that the game is over for you, because you are losing essentially a full turn of the game, and they are going to get to assault you again, and there's nothing you can do about it. The Devilfish help that out in 2 major ways, one that's obvious and one that kind of isn't. Okay. The obvious one is that they can't charge things that are inside a Devilfish.
Sure.
You can't charge what you can't see. Yeah. And the Devilfish itself has Fly, which allows it to pretty easily escape from most things, especially when you have multiple of them. A wall of Devilfish, several of them kind of lined up nose to tail. Not only are you going to struggle to do anything to them, because a lot of the common assault units, such as Orcs and Genestealer Cult and whatnot, are not actually all that good at killing vehicles in combat.
Yeah.
A horde of 30 boys doesn't even kill a Devilfish in one round of fighting, presuming you don't have a Power Claw in there, which a lot of people are steering away from. But even if they do, when they're kind of lined up nose to tail like that, you can just deploy the unit that's inside on the far side of the Devilfish from them, and there's no way they can really pile into you. So not only do you prevent them from hurting your important units, but you also make sure that when the Devilfish is finally destroyed, those units then get to act. And you can even if you're not inside the Devilfish themselves, because they're on a flying base, you can shoot under them, and the enemy can't charge through them. So they can form a physical wall between you and the enemy that allows you to shoot, but prevents them from charging, and that's exactly what Tau want.
Nice. Okay.
The flip side of that, and the other one that a lot of people haven't picked up on, if they do tri-point your unit, by locking that one guy in combat and surrounding him so that he cannot move away without trying to walk over the base of an enemy unit, which obviously is not legal. If you move a Devilfish within 3 inches of that model, which is tri-pointed, he is allowed to embark on the Devilfish.
Oh,
so even if he's tri-pointed, you can still get away as long as all the members of the squad can get into range of the Devilfish.
Okay.
So it is not always going to be something that's relevant, but it is a very sneaky way to pull a model out of combat, and prevent that loss condition where your game just ends. Yeah. And I haven't really focused on it, but I sort of touched on it at the beginning. The reason the Devilfish and Fire Warriors and all this stuff works together is not just because of the protection, but also because large numbers of Fire Warriors hit really, really hard.
Yeah. So going all the way back, though, what you're mentioning is that Tau, if they lose a shooting phase, either they themselves, like the major threats are in combat, so they can't shoot into combat. Tau don't have a real good way to dig people out of combat because they themselves don't have a lot of melee threat or psychic power, so they can't get out of it. So you can have a line of Fire Warriors, but if you get tri-pointed, which a lot of good players will, that's it. I mean, you're sort of, you've lost that phase. However, with the Devilfish, it's kind of like it's sort of like a Wave Serpent, really, because Wave Serpents are great for blocking things off because they fly. Their vehicles are not easy to kill, and you shove that out there, and then they can't actually get around it. That's actually quite clever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the unfortunate reality is that a Devilfish is not as good as a Wave Serpent because the Wave Serpent is just fantastically powerful. But Devilfish are still very acceptable vehicles, and the critical thing is that, well, the Wave Serpent is just a nice addition to an Eldar list. The Devilfish is a critical piece of many Tau armies.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So you talked about running like a brigade. What does a Tau brigade look like?
They tend to be fairly similar. So you'll have your HQs, obviously. There's a fair amount of options there. Almost all Tau armies are Tau Sept because Overwatching on 5s is twice as effective as Overwatching on 6s. And so it's like pretty much everyone goes with Tau. So you have access to a number of good named characters. You obviously have the Ethereals, the Firesight Marksmen, all that sort of thing. So HQs are where you tend to see the most variance.
Yeah.
Outside of that, elite slot is pretty much all of your battle suits.
Yep.
So you can kind of mix and match there, but you're usually seeing at least a couple Riptides, 1 to 3, depending on how much of an investment you're going for. But you also have a lot of cheaper choices you can invest in. Crisis suits have made a little bit of a comeback these days. You're seeing people bring them, running them with the Cyclic Ion Blaster, which is a very, very good gun. And I mentioned the stealth suits, the Firesight Marksman. There's a lot of good choices in your elite slot. It's kind of jam-packed full of them, to be honest.
The Tau Elite's over the top. Like all the good stuff. A lot of the good stuff's in the elite slot. Yeah.
Yes. Your troops, obviously, Fire Warriors are fantastic. Kroot are actually better than a lot of people give them credit for. You have to use them a little more carefully, but that ability to scout 7 inches before the game can be nice.
Yeah.
It can push enemies back. Pathfinders do a very similar thing to Kroot in that respect, and they also bring marker lights to the table, which any Tau player knows that marker lights are very important to the army. But you can also get tactical drones, which can either be gun, shield, or marker light. All 3 of them are good, and you can even mix them together in a squad if you want. So there's a lot of different things you can do there. There are some other okay choices in the fast attack slot, but overall it's probably the weakest slot in the Codex.
Yeah.
But,
although, I mean, drones are fast attacks. So drones are kind of...
They are. Yeah, it's just like you don't usually see much of anything other than drones in the fast attack slot. It's typically only drones because drones fly. They can't be trapped in combat. They protect your battle suits. They can bring marker lights. There's just so much that they do, and it's really hard for anything else to compete with that flexibility.
Yeah, for sure.
The last one is the heavy slot. Sniper drones, actually a very powerful choice in the heavy slot. You can get them all the way down to hitting on 3s or even 2s if you get all the marker lights stacked up. And their ability to target characters, their ability to deal mortal wounds, both of those are extremely powerful in the current meta. And you've seen people running as many as 27 sniper drones, the full 3 9-man squads. And when you put up stratagems and everything and start shooting all of that into a Castellan, it doesn't matter that it has a 3-up invulnerable save. You can tear that thing down in a turn or 2.
Yeah, and the fact that it puts out mortal wounds, which do Tau have any other sources for a lot of other sources for generating mortal wounds? Is that really the major one?
They do not. Yeah. Their only sources of mortal wounds are the sniper drones like that, the rail weapons, railgun, heavy rail rifle, and the regular version also do that, but they tend to be found on pretty expensive platforms. So it's like you'll get 1 or 2 that way. You're not going to do 7 mortal wounds like that. And the only other source they have is the Storm Surge's destroyer missiles, which are admittedly quite good, but they come on a 400-point vehicle, so not really going to be like spamming those out.
Yeah, for sure. Sniper drones, though, I guess the only real downside to sniper drones is the fact that they're that's a resin kit, isn't it? The Firesight Marksman.
Yes, and an expensive one that does not come with very many. I'm lucky because I like sniper drones before they were good, so I already owned quite a few of them. But for most people, the idea of buying 9 of that kit at $50 a pop is not super enticing.
Have you been running the hazard suits at all, the Forge World hazard suits, which I saw quite a few actually at Las Vegas Open recently, and they came down in price, but those look... I played against it. It's pretty good. They put a lot of shots. They
throw down a crazy number of shots, and they're pretty flexible little things. Unfortunately, a lot of their weapon loadouts are not great, but the double burst cannon version, or quadruple really, is quite good at what it does. I don't actually own any hazard suits, although I have been on the receiving end of them quite a few times. My opinion overall is that the hazard suit is quite good, but it does something you can already get in other slots. You have so many ways to get massed strength 5 firepower in Tau that, as good as the hazard suit is, I kind of look at it, it's like I'm already running 45 strike teams and 20 drones and my devilfish and all this other stuff. What do I need you guys for? So different sorts of lists may find some use for that if you're not running the same kind of setups that I tend to. But the hazard suit kind of gets overshadowed by the fact that every other unit in the Codex puts out strength 5 shots.
Strength 5 is Tau. I mean, strength 5 and then obviously strength 6, but strength 5 is really there just they have so much of it. So
they do. It's everywhere in their books.
And I guess I think one of the things with Tau that I was just thinking, if you're starting Tau you can build kind of a little castle stuff, but how are you projecting out? I mean, how are you capturing objectives? How are you, what are the things you take and what are your strategies for making sure that you're not just kind of pushed and shoved into like kind of a corner for 3-4 turns?
Well, that is absolutely critical to any Tau list. Like I said, if you just sit in your deployment zone, you might kill the enemy, but you're still going to lose the game.
Yeah.
So Devilfish can be a big part of that. Devilfish can advance and shoot. So you're not just giving up all your firepower. If you decide to go out and do something, they can carry units inside them. So you're actually toting around, if you decide to bring the full complement of 12 guys inside the Devilfish, then, you're looking at 50 odd shots coming out of that vehicle for under 200 points. So Devilfish can be very good for projecting outwards, especially because most people don't really want to kill Devilfish. They're not like exceptionally tough, but they're tough enough that you have to put work into it. And when you're trying to deal with all the other units, then those Devilfish are not really a high priority. So they often tend to survive till later in the game because no one wants to hurt them. By a kind of a similar token, the Riptides are often very critical to a Tau list because they're tough enough, especially in combination with drones, that they just don't die. You almost always have your Riptides alive by the turn 4, 5, 6. And they move 12 inches and potentially a lot further than that because you can Nova Charge for an extra 2d6 inches. So a Riptide can really go quite a long distance, and it's tough enough that it stays around and that it can advance forward even if there are enemy units nearby. So I often find my Riptides tend to do a fair amount of objective claiming for me. And then the other two that are maybe a little bit less obvious, stealth suits. One of the most important things stealth suits do is allow Tau to project outwards in those early turns of the game and claim those couple of objectives that are hanging out in weird places, ensure that you get that hold more or that you rack up your points early on there. And very late in the game, Cold Star commanders. I usually am pretty conservative with my Cold Stars, but they can move 40 inches when they need to, which means when like turns 5 and 6 roll around and you just need to hold 2 objectives, but you're not really near a second one, just flinging that commander outward to kill a unit and hop on an objective will actually earn you a lot of mileage. And yeah, he might die when the enemy shoots at him next turn, but if that puts you ahead on points, who cares?
And I like that tactic better. I've seen people take Cold Stars with fusions and just shove them up there turn 1, but I like the idea of keeping them back and waiting for the moment where they can kind of jump in and do the worst damage or take an objective or just target of opportunity, basically, at that point.
Absolutely. A very common Tau mistake is to get too aggressive with those Cold Stars and have them die early on. And your commanders are just too valuable to sacrifice to kill like a single vehicle. Because they probably will, but then like the enemy kills them, and what are you doing?
That's it. So you talked about Tau being kind of CP heavy. What are some of your favorite sort of stratagems that and combinations that you like that have worked for you with Tau?
Tau are actually very interesting because they have a lot of reactive stratagems. So I'm not going to go through all of those, but there are close to a dozen different, activate this when a thing happens stratagems that Tau have. A lot of them key off battle suits, and they all do these neat little effects. Several of them are when a battle suit dies or gets in close combat and stuff like that. And they tend to be pretty cheap. So a good Tau player kind of needs to know those. And I would encourage anyone who wants to learn about Tau and is trying to master them to kind of read through those stratagems and figure out, like, when's this going to be helpful? But there's a whole bunch of those. Outside of that, I have a couple go-tos and then a couple more that I find myself using a lot, but not every turn.
Got it.
One of my go-tos is actually the Tau Sept stratagem itself, and it's one of the best reasons to take Tau, is Focus Fire. It is 3 CP. It's quite expensive. And it requires you to deal an unsaved wound to an enemy unit with one of your own Tau units. But from that point on, every Tau Sept unit in your army gets +1 to wound that target. it means that you're, wounding even knights on like 4s. Like your basic troop wounds knights on a 4 at that point, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
And Tau have a lot of high rate of fire guns with multiple damage from like broadsides and riptides and stuff. And that'll just allow you to chew just about anything to pieces with that.
Nice.
It also enhances the mortal wounds off those sniper drones. It means you're getting mortal wounds on 5s and 6s.
Oh, yeah. Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is one of my go-to stratagems. I use it probably 3 to 4 times every game.
Yeah, and that's 9 CP right there, because it's an expensive strat, but it's super powerful. Yeah,
and that's one of the reasons Tau really need all those command points. Alongside that, uplinked marker light, nice and cheap at 1 CP. You just use it whenever you hit with a marker light, and instead of getting 1 hit, you get D3 plus 1. Building to 5 marker lights is pretty important for Tau. You really want to get your units to hitting on 3-ups with the reroll 1s, because then just like almost all your shots are landing, and you're a shooting army. You need to do that.
Yep.
So that one is very important to helping build your marker light count. Similarly, the Saucia stratagem, orbital marker light network. 2 CP, you use it just off a Saucia character, and honestly, you almost always want some Saucia in your list anyways, because they're very accurate marker lights. But it gives you, you pick a single model, and it gives you a marker light on that unit and every unit within 6 of it. So it's pretty easy to put like a marker light on most every unit in the enemy army with that. Because you see lots of people putting these big screening units out, and it's like every unit within 6 inches of a blob of cultists. Yeah, that's everything. So that is a really good way to start a marker light chain. And it also can do stuff like get you marker light hits onto characters that you can't otherwise target with marker lights.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Even like with snipers as well. Or
exactly
those units that have minuses to hit that are harder to hit, but if they're within range of something else, then there you go. There's your marker light on them.
It's very useful against anything with penalties to hit. Tau hate penalties to hit. It is one of the most backbreaking things for them. And it really makes the game hard, because so many of their units start at ballistic skill 4.
Yeah, and I guess how do they get around? Obviously, marker lights help, but especially when you're looking at some of the really crazy, especially Eldar flyers are the worst. Offenders, and we have both run lots of Eldar flyers at different times. We know how crazy they are. You can get to -2 without doing anything on -3. How does Tau work around those, especially when you have like 4 or 5 on the list?
So it's a struggle. That is not quite a hard counter, but a really rough matchup for a Tau list. But you do have a couple things. The velocity tracker item, +1 to hit against anything with fly. Almost all those units with stacked penalties to hit have the fly keyword. So if you are expecting to see Eldar flyer lists, you may want to be bringing the velocity tracker on some of your suits. It's a very popular choice on riptides and storm surges, and even on broadsides, it's sometimes worth it if you're kind of expecting that in your meta. That's a little bit more of a judgment call, but that is one of the advantages of Tau, is that they have all of these great support systems that you can customize your suits with depending on what you're expecting. And picking those properly is really important for a Tau player. You also do have some units with superior ballistic skill. Commanders, the hammerheads, although those are not particularly great right now because of the existence of the Castellan. But you do have some options with better ballistic skill. In fact, the Skyray itself hits on 2s against flyers normally. And then obviously you start taking your penalties and that cranks you back down. But it can be a very good tool against them as well. But it is a hard matchup. It is one you will be very hard pressed to win, but it's not impossible.
Got it. Yeah. So that tends to be a bit of a weakness. So what are some of the lists you think that Tau kind of struggle with?
Obviously, the Eldar flyer list we just talked about is really rough. They also can struggle a lot against armies that have very tough units with invulnerable saves. Custodes can be a very tough matchup. Because, like we mentioned earlier, Tau really don't have very many ways to deal mortal wounds. They're quite rare. And if your opponent just kind of like rolls 4s, then you're in trouble. And there's not really anything you can do about it, but just hope that they stop rolling 4s.
Because, you've got all that volume of shots, but at some point they have to fail, especially if
you often think so, but part of the problem is that because Tau are entirely dependent on the shooting phase in order to do anything, if you get a bad shooting phase against a really fast army like Custodes jet bikes, like that can be it right there. Like, I rolled badly on turn 1, but it'll come back around on turn 2. Well, you might not get a turn 2. Armies that come at you so fast that you only have one turn to do anything. If you get bad luck, then that's just it right there.
Yeah.
And whereas like some other armies can kind of recover from that and be like, okay, well, they assaulted me, but I have my countercharge units. Well, as Tau, you don't.
Yeah.
You're just living in the shooting phase there. So extremely aggressive armies can be problematic. It's great that you get that whole bonus shooting phase out of when they decide to charge you, but it's not always enough. And kind of to go along with this, and honestly, one of the biggest weaknesses for Tau can be terrain.
Yeah.
Tau are very, very dependent on how the terrain is set up in your local area. So if you get that like city fight board that has like 9 or 12 ruins on it, all just crammed right in next to each other, then that is a super bad place to be for Tau. But by the same token, if like your tournaments are kind of light on terrain because they're straining the number of players they have, and you're playing on like Planet Bowling Ball with like 2 forests and 1 hill, then Tau are just going to clean things off the table.
Yeah. Do you think that like the LVO to me had kind of some of the tables maybe had less or more terrain, but to me as a standard, it felt like it was a really good tournament standard, and Nova also has a really nice standard for terrain. Do you feel that Tau are pretty balanced with that kind of level of terrain, like a line of sight in the middle and a couple of ruins and, a balanced level amount of terrain?
For the most part, I would say yes. I was actually very nervous about LVO going into it. I ended up deciding not to bring Tau because of the potential for the terrain to kind of like screw me over. But having seen it in advance and kind of hindsight is 2020, I say I would have been fine playing with the terrain there. The whole like magic boxes thing, enclosed ruins like that can be pretty bad for Tau. When I was at the Charity Hammer stream event, I had a couple of matches where people were able to take large blocks of very tough infantry, like grotesques, and charge out of ruins and do some very unfortunate things to my Tau.
Yep.
And that possibility is very much there. Part of that was the terrain. Part of that was there were things that I misplayed. But the reality of it is like, that option for misplay only came up because I was specifically playing Tau, and it was like, oh, there's this huge ruin right here that like 15 grotesques can hide inside.
Yeah. And you don't have enough smart missile systems. I mean, which is, by the way, smart missiles is fantastic, but it's not
a great
enough.
gun.
It's not enough to take on a big, nasty threat like that.
There aren't enough smart missiles in the world to handle something like that. It's like, when you're like hitting on 4s or 5s, wounding on 5s, and they get a 4 up in Vuln and 6 up Feel No Pain and 4 wounds apiece. It's just like you would need 40 or 50 guns in order to handle something like that.
And to be fair, I mean, I felt like one of the list archetypes that we saw at LVO were those the lists that had a really nasty infantry blob, a tough like grotesques or wraith blades or what's the
Bulgrin
or Bulgrin? Those 3 they're just really hard to handle for not just Tau but lots of lists. They're tough because if they're in an enclosed ruin, you can't do anything to them.
Yes, and Tau don't have the countercharge unit to handle that. It can shape a whole game, and that's absolutely an archetype we're seeing a lot of these days, is this so-called bully unit that just sits in the middle of the table and says, like, you can't come within 24 inches of me. If you do, I'm going to charge you and destroy you.
I guess that's why the Devilfish make a lot of sense, because you're like, okay, you can charge, but you're going to do something to this vehicle. It gives you another turn to keep shooting.
It does, because that Bulgrin unit, like as tough as they are, if you put 2 Devilfish in front of them and then, bring the rest of your gun line up behind, they're not going to be able to charge the gun line because they can't pass under the Devilfish. And they can charge the Devilfish and like the full squad of them kills 1 or maybe both of those Devilfish, but then they're sitting out in the open against your entire gun line.
Yeah.
And they're tough, but they're not that tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. That's awesome. So, and I guess thinking about the mortal wound issue, I understand it makes more sense why. I mean, we know that sniper drones are good, but it makes sense if that's the real source of mortal wounds. And if you're mortal wounding on a 5 with the focus fire strat, that's really nasty.
Yeah, it is, and it can solve a lot of problems that Tau otherwise struggle with.
Yeah.
The Blood Angels captain with the Angel's Wing is a real problem for that list. That guy alone can go through a large chunk of a Tau gun line, and the ability to just snipe him out before he becomes a problem is pretty huge for them.
Nice, excellent. All right, so I guess we're thinking about Tau. Is Tau a competitive choice? I mean, as we've kind of gone through this entire discussion, is it something that you think will be competitive in the future, or do you think Tau need a little more something like points adjustments or, maybe a campaign book, or do you think they're okay right now?
I absolutely think they're a competitive choice. Even before the upgrades from Chapter Approved, as I said, like I managed to win Harvester Souls with them, and obviously that involved a bit of luck, but taking a major tournament should be a pretty obvious signifier for a lot of folks. And we have consistently seen Tau lists making their way into the top 5 at very big tournaments.
Yeah.
So I think Tau are going to be a force to be reckoned with for the foreseeable future here. That said, there's some small changes I would like to see for them. I don't really want to go into it too deep here because a lot of it is really sort of weird niche stuff that is more about like overall game balance and sort of game philosophy than anything that like this unit isn't good enough.
Yeah.
But if for anyone who is looking at Tau either playing as or against them, I would say they definitely are a strong competitor.
Now, especially somebody who maybe they play Tau casually and they want to go to an event or something. What are some things that they need to really understand and do well with Tau in order to do well with Tau? Like, what are some things they need to work on? What are some things they need to always remember when they're playing Tau?
It's actually a really good question. I was just talking to a guy about this yesterday because I was at a little RTT and I won't say he's new to Tau, but Tau is not his primary army.
Sure.
And so like after the game, we kind of talked about like, you clearly made a mistake here or here or this thing. One of the biggest ones is knowing your 6-inch auras. That focus fire, or not focus fire, supporting fire from 6 inches that allows you to overwatch for other units. There were several times that he moved out of that 6-inch range and allowed me to get charges that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. That's absolutely huge. And they also have lots of character auras like most armies that are 6-inch range. So having a strong feeling for that is very important. Movement in general is really important for Tau armies. Knowing how far you can afford to advance, what the enemy's likely charge range is, all of that sort of thing. Tau only get 2 phases per turn. They get to move and they get to shoot. And you need to be really good at both of them.
Yeah.
Because you need to know where you need to move to, and you need to know what you need to shoot. Because the other big thing for Tau armies is just target priority. Knowing what do I have to kill this turn? What in the enemy army is most threatening to me?
Yeah.
Because it's not always necessarily the unit that can do the most damage to you. That can be important, but you also need to get victory points and you need to control territory, and knowing when you need to change your priorities and what needs to die and what can stay alive and what you can sacrifice out of your own army is absolutely huge.
Yeah. It feels like to me playing Tau, I've never played Tau, but I have this idea that there is a certain amount of pressure with Tau, and that, shooting is, if you're shooting units and they're not dying, it feels like the tension can start to rise. If you're a Tau player, you're like, oh, geez, I'm running out of guns here and this thing needs to go, or I need to do something here. It feels like Tau really, really need to succeed in the shooting phase, or it's going to be a struggle for them. And it feels like that could be kind of a tense situation if you're playing Tau. To me, it feels that way.
It definitely can. Coming out of a bad shooting phase as Tau can be a real punch in the gut.
Yeah.
But I think the sort of the mitigating factor there is, unlike some armies, Tau have a kind of a progressive kind of phase. Whereas, like, if you were an assault army, you can do all your movement and all your psychic and shooting and all that, and until you start rolling charges, you have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you go into that charge phase 100% blind, and 4 different dice rolls are going to determine your entire turn.
Yeah.
And you might have some rerolls, but you probably don't get like full rerolls on everything. And if you just roll like 3s and 4s 4 times, that's it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about that. Tau have the advantage of shooting is sequential, and you can kind of see what each unit does before moving on to the next one. So you need to be able to update your priorities in real time.
Yeah.
And understand, like, oh, I didn't roll as well as I needed to on this unit, which means I'm not going to be able to kill that thing this turn. Well, that means I need to redirect some of my firepower over here to deal with this instead. I always, as when playing as Tau, like, I'm always kind of doing that mental calculus of, like, how is my shooting phase going? Where can I afford to put my guns? Because another big thing is you can split your firepower.
Yeah.
And good Tau commanders need to learn to estimate probabilities on the fly. So you can say, like, okay, I have a full unit of 3 broadsides with rerolls. Where am I going to put those guns? Because if you put all 48 shots of that unit into one target, unless it is incredibly tough, you're probably wasting a lot of firepower.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't want to, like, just put like 2 guns into something and then have it live and not be able to shoot it with anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're playing this very careful balancing act at all times, which can be very stressful for some people, but I actually find it to be very enjoyable. As, like, I get to do this kind of mental math as I'm like, okay, I did a little worse than I needed there, so I'm going to have to change this and do this other thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. I mean, maybe you want to, you fire the marker lights off and you get 5 on a unit, and then you say, okay, stop. I've got other marker lights. I'm going to wait to try to get at least a single marker light on this other unit, but this is my secondary target. You know, and the split fire thing, yeah, I could actually see that be kind of it'd be a challenge, but you talk about the movement phase. The movement phase has to set up the shooting phase, so you have to make sure you have things in position so you have options, because you're always trying to give yourself as many options as possible.
Yes, a Tau army is all about that kind of statistical and numerical optimization. It's like, I need to give myself the options, and I need to be able to take advantage of those options. And if you're the kind of person who really enjoys that kind of fine-tuned numbers game like that, where you're really like, okay, I can, if optimize this by doing a little bit better here, and that didn't quite work out the way I needed, so I need to adjust all of these other things. If you're the kind of player who enjoys that, if you're coming out of like a lot of the MMOs and other kind of games like that encourage that kind of fine-tuned numbers work, Tau may be a very good army for you.
Cool. Yeah. And I mean, also the aesthetic of Tau is very unique, I think, to 40K. And for some people, and myself, I mean, I'm a Robotech, Battletech guy, so I love the way they look.
Yes, that's actually part of what drew me to Tau, was not just the aesthetic, because like they do have that cool kind of sleek futuristic look to a lot of their suits that is very distinct from many of their factions, but also they're arguably the most optimistic faction in the game, both from a like within their own context and from the outside context. Is like Tau are the only race that's on the rise and who are attempting to do good things.
Yep, for sure. Agreed. All right. So, Sean, that is all I have. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us about Tau and how you can get better at it and how you really can compete at sort of the highest level with Tau.
Oh, it was really good talking to you, and I hope the listeners have found it to be useful to them. We also talk about a lot of these kind of subjects on our own podcasts. So,
definitely plug it.
As you mentioned before, in the Finest Hour and Chapter Tactics. Chapter Tactics tends to be more of kind of discussion of meta as a whole, but we certainly go over a lot of this stuff in those as well.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Sean. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
All right, so that is Sean. And you know what Sean brought up that we did not mention were devilfish. We did not talk about devilfish in our first part one, but devilfish are a huge, are a really important unit for Tau. In much the way that wave serpents are, because they can fly and you can set them out front and you can assault them, but the Tau just hop out behind. They're huge. They're big models for really not being that many points. And a lot of Tau use them as just an aid to kind of extend out their castle. Because things pop, the firewars jump out. There's just one more wall of tough armor to get through, especially for like assault units that kind of sweep in and do damage.
They're cheap. They're 98 points base.
Yeah.
12 models. Yeah, that's cheap.
Yep. They're cheap.
Yep. And I think cheap transports that have some combat ability are going to be, I think they're going to start showing up more. Now that we've identified the meta is going to be shifting away from some things, so we're removing vehicles, multiple vehicles a turn.
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see as we see more horde focused and more anti-horde focused, how I've never really been a big lover of rhinos.
Yeah.
But an interesting use of rhinos is as a moving bunker.
Yeah.
Or you charge them into a unit that you don't have to deal with. That can't kill a rhino quickly. So devilfish fit that.
Yeah.
But also have fly. So you can do that, and then they fly away and they shoot you. So it's very useful.
Yeah.
12 wounds.
12 wounds.
12 wounds.
Yeah.
But tougher than a rhino too.
Yeah. And as we talked about last episode, the most optimal way of running Tau is with a bunch of characters. There's the Farsight Marksman, and there's the Cadre Fireblades, and those all snuggle up into transports real nice to lower your drop rate.
Yep, for sure. And then because now we're seeing so many snipers and things, especially with the Vindicare Assassin. I'm putting more snipers on my list because I have to anti-sniper the snipers that I know are going to come my way. Yeah, those characters, Tau, are super susceptible to getting popped by sniper fire, basically. Okay, so that was Sean. So now let's hear about Val. He's had a different experience with Tau, and we'll hear about the infamous shoe incident as well.
You've heard the yin, now's the yang.
Now's the yang, yes. Consequently, Val, I think, is just now playing orcs now. So let's hear from Mr. Val Heffelfinger. All right, so tonight we have Val Heffelfinger on the Battlehosts. How are you doing, Val?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. So you are a veteran of these podcasts. Which ones are you on now?
Regularly, I make appearances on Forge the Narrative, and Chapter Tactics primarily.
Oh,
but I'm a long with all of them. I started as a long-time listener and eventually a first-time caller. So been listening to Battle Hosts since I first picked up listening to 40K podcasts. I've been along for a long time.
Yeah. So I have to know, how did you work your way into being that first guest spot? How did you become kind of the internet Val that we kind of know, the 40K Val?
Well, oppressive, withering Facebook presence helps with name recognition. A constant nattering online help. But actually, for 40K, I don't have a lot of, at the time, I didn't have a lot of close friends yet. Now I've built awesome friendships with people all over the place, including in my hometown.
Sure.
But, it was kind of me and a buddy who used to play back in the day, and then podcasters. So I would just sort of reach out and chat with people as if they were my friends, and eventually they became my friends. And I would meet them, and then I got invited on for a spot. I think the first real one I did was Pablo talked to me about competitive gaming or competitive 40K versus casual 40K based on a local podcast that I'd actually done that he liked. Yeah. And then from there, he brought on some regular co-hosts, and I guess I was on his brain, and I got an invite. It was nice.
Nice. Okay. So this is the first time you've been on our podcast, and I can't believe it's been this long, but I'm glad to finally have you on.
Oh, well, hey, it was an absolute pleasure. It's always nice to be invited on to chat.
Yeah. So we are doing, we're talking about Tau. And when we do these Army Codex reviews, we like to have sort of guests on. And I thought about you because the first time I was introduced to Mr. Heffelfinger, you were playing, I think it was 7th edition. You were on the stream, the 40K stream, playing Matt Shuckman.
Yep.
And he was playing Seer Council. And I was watching that because I was just in awe of how he played Seer Council. And then there's this guy named Val, who actually walked over to talk to the 40K host. I think it was probably Rob at the time.
Oh, no.
And they were shocked. This is different people.
No, actually, it was Mini Wargamer Dave.
Oh, it was Mini Wargamer Dave.
Who happens to be from my mom's hometown.
Oh, nice.
And the other guy who Rob was with. Rob was sleeping in a corner.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
14-hour days.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I crossed that velvet rope and like broke that third wall, they did not like it at all.
Yeah.
They froze like statues. And I believe what I said was, "Did you guys know he could do that?"
Yeah.
I didn't know he could do that.
And
And Shuckman was just tap dancing all over me.
And of course, they didn't know he could do that because that was 7th edition, and they're like, they had no idea.
Well, I remember it was my first insight into sort of Games Workshop at the time. The guy who's doing the the sideline reporting, because there's a guy. The way that stream works is they're removed from the action quite a lot. They're watching all the live feeds, and then there's a guy at the table who's sort of typing in what's happening.
Yeah,
that guy was like, "Oh wow, Riptides are pretty good, huh?" And I was like, "Really?" And this is like peak Riptide. This was,
there was more Riptides than people there. Yeah.
And I don't think he was being facetious. Maybe he got me with his dry English wit, but I think he legitimately was like, "Man, they're onto something with these Riptides."
Yeah, it was awesome when you walked. It was kind of like sometimes you hear about stories about bands bringing their fans up to sing, except in this case, you weren't actually invited.
No.
You just sort of broke third wall yourself.
No. I thought it'd be funny, or at least, mildly engaging, but it's probably the clip somewhere. You get to see my face. It's one of the rare face appearances of Val Heffelfinger.
Well, you know what? I thought it was funny. So there you go.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad someone out there noticed my efforts.
So also the thing is, so you're playing Tau back then, and how long have you been playing Tau? You've been playing Tau for how long?
So when I first came back into 7th edition, it would have been 2016, right? Or 19, I'm almost 4 years ago.
Yeah.
No, it was 2015. So yeah, 2015 was when I started. So it would have been probably like around the spring of 2016, because I came back playing Orcs, but 7th edition Orcs, once I got the tournament bug in me, I realized that they couldn't be my main whip.
Yeah.
And in those days, Eldar were pretty awesome, and there were some other things, and I heard Reese and Frankie talking about how awesome Double Storm Surge Triple Riptide was.
Yeah.
Or Dub Surge Trip Rip, as I like to say.
Oh yeah.
So that was actually my first GT list was that, and I went. I want to say, I was really close to 5-1 at Capital City Bloodbath that year, but I just through a comedy of errors, I lost my last game, but it was my first GT, and I did super well with that list. It was very binary, but so was a lot. A lot of the 7th matchups did come down to, can you deal with this or not? I was actually in a matchup where the answer should have been no, they can't deal with this, and I managed to let it slip away. Yeah. But it was great, and so Tau sort of became my competitive army, and then in that game that you saw was actually what I thought was a really clever list, making use of some of the formations, and it wasn't something that people used often, and I really loved that list. I wish I could have played it better, but
yeah, and it's no shame losing to Shuckman too. I mean, he's and he played Seer Council with like a just ridiculous amount of, and then that was it. Then again, that was 7th. And
that was before BCP. That was before, a lot of names were names. Yeah. Like, so I had no idea what I was waltzing into there. And like, he showed me a list of his psychic powers, and it was just this it was a 8.5 by 11 sheet just with words all over it. And I was like, yeah, cool. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. That was good times. Or not actually, because actually I don't miss any of that, honestly. Yeah, and I played Seer Council, so
it was a different type of game. You do see some players, especially the good players from that era. Some of them actually sort of pine for those days, because there was certainly a lot of intricacy at the top level with it. But there was also a lot of binary matchups, like we said there. So 7th has its fans even to this day, believe it or not. They're just usually shouted down whenever they appear.
That is true. Now, 8th edition rolls around. Were you rolling with Tau at the very beginning of 8th? Did you just kind of roll into it, or what else did you have you tried out? Or was Tau the first thing you started with 8th edition?
Day 1, 8th edition, I actually played in an RTT day 1, because everything had been leaked before, and I played Orcs, was actually day 1, 8th edition, because I could get the boys out, and I won that RTT. So that was pretty awesome. But then everyone talked so much garbage about Index Tau, and I was like, screw that, man. Index Tau's got some moves. And immediately they were more sexy than Orcs for some reason in my mind. So I played them in a GT, and I played this Seeker Missile spam list that I thought was kind of clever, and ran into I think maybe the first character spam list that anyone had run, because it was like 3 weeks after 8th had come out, and this guy just had only characters. And of course, the guy in the front, because characters could block for characters. The guy in the front was a Calexis.
Yeah.
So I couldn't target anything with marker lights. I couldn't get any of my secret missiles to fire, and I just lost so badly, and my cleverness ran out. But from there, after that, I went back to Orcs for a while until I made the ETC team, and then it became clear. I think a lot of people were thinking that Orcs would be kind of like a June release last year.
Yeah.
So we felt pretty strong that, I'd be able to run the boys in Europe. And as that deadline came and we started getting some whispers that, it's a little further off than you think, I switched back to Tau with some might say tragic consequences.
So let's talk about the ETC. The ETC stories are your famous or infamous, I suppose, for the passport and the shoe.
That's what they call blowing the lead, pal.
Yeah. But that's not even the most interesting part about it. What was your Tau experience at the ETC?
It was awful. It was category. Like, I'm sure if you have any European listeners who are somewhat familiar with the ETC scene. And you say, we're bringing on some Tau experts. We've got Sean Morgan and Val Heffelfinger. And someone's going to be like, just spit their tea all over their little tiny car. But no, so we were looking at a lot of list concepts coming into it. And our captain is still is. He's a big fan of just wounds on the table bodies. So I wound up running a lot of Fire Wars, but probably not, in retrospect, enough, and I ran 80. So I ran 80 Fire Warriors, I think 2 units of 10 Pathfinders, something like that, plus 3 Riptides, and then not enough drones, and essentially proceeded to go 0-6, scoring a total of 4 points across the entire tournament. I just got browbeat every single game, and it was a complete failure. I think the list wasn't the only thing at fault. So for those who don't know the meme, I actually went overseas early and I played in this tournament in Stockport, run by the guys at Dyson Decks. Guy named Martin is a store owner there. Guy named Aceface, who runs a cool YouTube channel, is the TO of the tournament. And so I went there to get some practice against the European scene, and I had an all right tournament. I think I lost more than I won, but it was still like, just getting my feet wet. Now
just getting warmed up. You're okay. Yeah.
And I was supposed to play in the singles. And actually, the first thing I did when I got to Europe or got to the UK was I got changed and I went and hopped on a podcast with Paul Murphy. I did a quick conversation about Tau, and I talked about how great Fire Warriors were, because all my testing actually had gone really well.
Sure.
And I was really feeling great about the list. And one thing I am is actually super paranoid about my passport when I'm traveling. I want to make sure it's safe. And I distinctly remember putting it in my shoe. But because I was quite, I guess, I don't know, jet lagged or just tired, at some point I managed to just completely forget the fact that I wasn't wearing the shoes that I was wearing at the time when I was looking for my passport. So I actually had changed my shoes as part of that. And I wore orthotics, and I put my insert over top of the passport in the shoe that I then wore for about a week walking around the UK, Warhammer World. I was visiting friends all over the place. My passport was getting ground down in my shoe. So when I went to fly, obviously I couldn't find my passport, and went through a pretty harrowing about day and a half, 2 days. I was supposed to play in the ETC singles, so that was my ETC practice against ETC level competition. That's 6 games that I missed. And I'll tell you, if you ever want to have just a good anonymous cry, Trafalgar Square, I think, if you just want to just sit down and weep and have 0 people somehow notice that girl man is crying. I think Times Square, Trafalgar Square, any big square.
I was going to say, it's the Times Square of London. Yeah, for
exactly. Sure. Which also happens to be Canada House, the embassy for Canada is right there. So when I lost my passport, I knew exactly where I had to go. Just go visit Admiral Nelson. But anyway, so I managed to get my passport, went to the UK, but I was notably frazzled. And we could probably talk a little bit about actual Tau, because I think what routinely got me against really high caliber opponents is that Tau is is a lot in the movement phase and very specific movement.
Yeah.
I came to feel like they're actually a really defensively stanced army, and that was kind of my role on the team too, was to maybe not win but not lose too badly and score points. But the problem is if you get if you leave yourself in threat range, if you don't space out your bubbles properly, if your drones are just misplaced or in the wrong spot, you get punished really badly.
Yeah.
So someone who knows how to approach taking on Tau can actually beat it down real easy, especially if the Tau player is making mistakes. And I would say that it was my list may have not been the greatest, but I think I just errors compounded on errors, and it just was a wheels falling off situation. They were actually warming up the coach to put him in over me. He'd never played Tau. That's real. So it was a low point. I had to do a lot of soul searching when I came back. I took a few weeks off for sure.
Yeah, and then you promptly switched to orcs. Is that what you? Is that what you?
I think I played in an RT. I think I ran like a silly all Riptide list in an RTT, but that was probably the last time I've actually I had the Tau on the table in the fall. And then the orcs came out. And they are legitimately my first love, and it's been a lot of fun being able to play them with their book too.
So orcs and Tau play completely different, and so was that by design? Is that like you wanted two different armies that are very, very different from each other? Like, because we always make decisions way, way back when we first get started. You have your first love, and then you have kind of the one that you sort of flirt with, and is like your second army. Some of us have like a single army we're dedicated to. Others will just play whatever, and they don't really care. But I mean, did you purposely pick out two armies that were different just to kind of stretch yourself, or do you just genuinely like both of those armies?
I think the reason I honestly picked them was, in 7th edition, they seemed like a good army for tournaments, and they were pretty decent, and they weren't Eldar.
Yeah.
Or they weren't demons. They weren't some other. And I think I was being a bit of a snowflake by choosing them and not going with one of those other lists. And also, to be honest with you, one of the most comfortable lists I've ever played was the Double Storm Surge 3 Riptides list, because it was so simple. Like, less moving parts does make things easier when you're learning how to play in events. That's why I think Knights are a great choice for beginning players, because you only got so many models to deal with. You only have so many rules to know. If you screw up, you got durability. And you're always going to be stomping around having a good time. So I think that's one of the reasons I really like Tau, is that they felt like, I don't want to say like an easy army. Well, that wasn't an easy army to play, but and it got more complicated after that.
Yeah.
I love the suits. The big suits are really awesome. I do like the sort of overwhelming firepower and working in conjunction elements of it. Mm-hmm. I like that they're kind of the good guys, but not really.
Yeah.
There's lots of stuff that really tickles my fancy about Tau.
Yeah, Sean. So when we talked to Sean, he mentioned that because I remarked that when you're playing Tau, if you're playing Tau, there feels like there could be a lot of pressure if the shooting phase is not going exactly the way you want it to go or you need it to go. And as you start to run out of guns, if you haven't done the damage or killed the threat that you need to kill, I imagine it can be kind of stressful as a Tau player.
Yeah, or like, and because so many, it's such a codependent army, and I think I don't want to spend more time talking wailing on the Tau Codex, but my feeling of it was either the writer who was in charge of this either hit a deadline, because it came out with Necrons, Tau, and Dark Eldar. Dark Eldar, of course, is out of the park, one of the best books they've ever written.
Yep.
Necrons kind of missed in a way that's very similar to Tau, so I don't know if they just got really into Dark Eldar and were like, oh no, blimey, we got to write some other codexes. and they just rushed it out, or if the guy just threw his hands up and quit, because it feels unfinished, the book. Like, if you look at how the stratagems are distributed amongst what they can benefit there, I don't think, aside from a repair strat, I don't think there's a single one that targets vehicles. There's the jetpack keyword that's on all the suits. It has no rule.
Yeah.
So there's lots of things like that where it just didn't feel finished, and I think it's too bad, because the Tau have such a deep, wonderful range, and they have a unique proposition, which is, they have no close combat. They have basically no assault phase.
Yeah.
Like, Riptides used to be able to go beat up Space Marines.
Yeah,
they used to be able to do stuff. They no longer. Fine, no problem. Yeah. Storm Surges used to have stomps. They used to do all kinds of good stuff in hand-to-hand. No longer. Cool. I get it. But if that's your game design constraint, then really no psychic phase, obviously. Marker lights, I suppose, are the mechanic they're supposed to pick up for that. But if you're spotting your opponents, 3 significant phases, then you need to be able to dominate in the shooting phase and also the movement phase, quite frankly. Yeah. And 7th edition Tau were really good in the movement phase because they had move, shoot, jump. And so they could cover crazy ground. They could get out of the way. They could either jump behind a building or move out of range of your opponent's guns. And for those who don't know, in the what used to be the assault phase, you could roll 2d6 at like a charge move essentially, and just make that. If you were a suit, Riptides, Crisis suits, etc. So that gave you a tremendous amount of even drones too. Were able to do that. So it just gave you a lot of movement flexibility to be able to cover ground, go get objectives, get out of the way. Get out of the way is super important because what you have now, even with units that are quick, is an issue where Tau tends to wind up standing in an open field, and if they do get average or above dice rolls in their first 2 turns when they're all buffed up, I'm sure Sean talked about Shadow Sun and her benefits, and the concentrated firepower, whatever it is, the Tau strat that gives you +1 to wound, all those things, they can really blow up a very specific point on the battlefield, and there are things that can go terribly wrong. Not being able to get a marker light on something, with all the -1 a hit, et cetera, like a Latok Eldar are a very, very tough matchup.
The -1 a hit's brutal for them. Yeah, you're right.
Particularly. So, and I don't want to whine because I think Tau, ironically, and this actually was the same in 7th, Tau was I used to say, like, the nemesis of the casual player. And even amongst people who are, good players, Tau is often their least favorite matchup because it tends to be binary. What can the Tau shoot me off the table before I can do my thing? Yes or no? Yeah. And that's even, I think, with a lot of the Tau builds in 8th, that is still really the premise.
Yep. Yeah. Do you think that, so I've heard Fire Warriors, right? Fire Warriors are, this bread and butter for Tau lists. Do you think that Fire Warriors tend to kind of pin the Tau in place? Like, I mean, they're not super fast, especially if they're just infantry on foot. So in a way, you don't have movement anymore. You sort of have these Tau castles that sort of sit there, and they don't necessarily have that dynamic movement that they had in 7th edition. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, do you think that and maybe that's just a different way to play them, but I just wonder if with the infantry that they have, does that tend to slow them down, or does that tend to make them less, that they just can't move like they should?
So the Tau Fire Warrior, I think its virtues are actually he's not too slow. So he moves pretty quick himself. I mean, he's 6 inches, right? Yeah. So and when you combine him with Ethereals and Montka, which allows them to advance and shoot as if they haven't moved, you can cover a good clip with the unit of Fire Warriors. I think for me, Fire Warriors fall down with durability. So they're T3. They're T3 with a 4-up save. They're 7 points, which is awesome, by the way. I mean, the same as an Orc Boy. And, sure. At range, they can do well. But their range as well, although it's 30 inches, from one point of view, really their damage potential is really magnified in that 15-inch range. Yeah. Because a Tau Fire Warrior near Cadra Fireblade fires an extra shot in rapid fire. So those blocks of Tau Fire Warriors at 15 inches can bring down things like a knight. Yeah. So you get the 3-unity Devastation Warlord trait. You get the +1 to wound. To get that going off, you pair up with Dark Strider to get the wound chain going. Yeah. Proc it, like the Magic players would say. Yep. So that on paper that got me interested, but when that all happens in 15 inches, and when you need enough of them in mass that you can't really hide them, that becomes hard to do, especially when you're in a meta that is used to dealing with hordes and has the guns to really just pick up your units with impunity. Yeah, and I think that's the thing is, if Tau are shooting, then they can be shot. And they don't, they have smart missiles, but those are not, you can't rely on a volume of smart missiles to hide out of cover. So
The only thing, like the suits, at least have drones. You can bring enough drones that a Riptide won't really die turn 1 if you bring enough of them. But Fire Warriors can die just by the handful because they have to be in range and they have to be able to see you. And they're a small model anyway, so they're typically way out in the open just to be able to shoot.
And that's where the critical mass with the Fire Warriors is really important, I think. I think there has been success with people running Fire Warriors, but when we say that, like maybe someone at home is thinking, oh, like 60 Fire Warriors? Oh, this guy had 80. Yeah. Well, more like 180 maybe, or 140. Like there's a tipping point because, if you can get, the 80 Fire Warriors to where they got to be to unleash what they're able to do and be basically unchargeable too.
Yeah.
Then you've got to figure, well, how many are they going to chew through before I'm there?
Yeah.
And so where is that tipping point? The other thing is running that many models for me personally, although I tend to always wind up running these really model heavy lists. For me, it's very difficult. Because the other thing too, that you got to think about is the fact that that's, maximum Fire Warrior squad is 12. So you can run them. I don't know. I think I was running them in 8 or 9 because morale becomes an issue with them, even if you have the Cecilia Ethereal nearby with the 10 leadership. So that's each unit is firing individually, right? Yeah. So if you got 80 Fire Warriors, you got to roll through 8 units, each one throwing, if you're in max range and in close range, 30 shots. It's a lot of dice, man, and it's a lot of dudes. So there's an exhaustion level. It's like a horde army where you don't get the payoff of getting into close combat.
Yeah, and you're not getting extra movement from charges and things like that. Yeah,
that's a big deal.
Have you tried a Tau suit army, more like a more suit focused army? I've seen hazard suits running. People run those to some level of success. Have you tried that?
I think my, when I was playing around with things, I was running, triple Riptides. This was before, obviously. I haven't actually gotten I was playing with broadsides and test lists. Yeah. Even going into ETC, and actually the best ETC list, I think, was on the ETC Tau list, was played by a guy on the Russian team, and he actually had 3 solo broadsides with the railgun.
No.
So hey, he knew something I didn't.
Interesting. Okay.
But that's a meta that's ancient history now. It's like 9 months ago.
Yeah. Funny how things change. Yeah.
As far as the suit list is concerned, so there's a guy in sort of my local area, and he gets out to some big tournaments too. His name's Devin Swan, and he's been running roughshod on people with a list that's essentially, I don't know how it is right now, but the first time I saw it was right when, I think it was before even the Tau points drops came down, and essentially all he did was he took a big unit of broadsides. He took, I think 3 Riptides, Shadow Sun, and then as many shield drones as it could possibly get.
Yeah.
And honestly, that was advice given to me, and I said, no, I got to go this I got to go this Fire Warrior way. And they're like, no, man, you need more shield drones. And when you think about it, so like Tau are uniquely durable, especially when you look at their suits because of savior protocols. Now they're a little more vulnerable in the psychic phase. Okay, cool. It's still not going to get the volume of drones killed that you need. But when you think of playing the objectives, or as far as a model that's able to cover ground and do good things for you, a drone, with a 4-up and a 5-up feel no pain, or a 5-up, after damage save, whatever you want to call it, it's actually a neat thing. It can't be trapped. It's got an 8-inch move and has fly, so you can't grab onto them like you can a unit of Fire Warriors. They can, advance and suffer no penalties for that because they don't have a gun anyway. So they're always able to move, anywhere between 9 and 14 inches. And a unit of 10 of them, you can string that out 30 inches. So you can touch, a lot of things wherever you want at the same time as being in range of the things you need to protect. That being said, people are going to be shooting your drones.
Yep.
Again, it comes to that tipping point. How many can you get into the list before they become a drag on your shooting efficiency? But if you go with the concept of if my suits are alive, I have tremendous firepower, which is true. And then how many of those do you really need to consistently hurt pretty much any list? I mean, if you had a unit of 3 broadsides and 3 Riptides that you could comfortably say will survive 3 turns or 2 turns.
That's a lot. Yeah.
That's a pretty good proposition.
Yeah.
Whereas the amount of drones I've ever run in real life is nowhere near enough. It's my design to survive first turn, because I thought, if I can get 2 rounds of shooting, like, I've probably blown them away. Not so fast. I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Yeah. How many drones do you think? In my mind, I'm thinking like 6 per suit, or 6 per chunk. I mean, that at least 6 to 8. I don't know what a good ratio there is, though.
Well, in the list, in that original list that he was running, he had 26, and he ran it to great effectiveness, and he said he never ran out of drones. I don't know if that ever changed.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can fire a list that can get through 26 drones, but you're also not probably leaning into some of the other stuff that can put a hurt on for you.
Yeah. That just feels bad shooting drones, anyways. But yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, playing Tau, I played against Tau, and I had a Castellan. I shoot the Volcano Lance, a drone dies, maybe. And he might even get a 5-up, save against that. So, yeah, Tau are sort of sneaky durable. But let's go all the way back to, first of all, the shoe story. How did you finally find your passport? Did you just, you said you had an insole over it. Were you shaking your shoes out? Or, I mean, how did you finally learn this?
I have I had I had my good cry on Trafalgar Square, and actually I had some friends from Canada there, and to get a new emergency passport, you just have to get someone with a passport to vouch for you. So that happened.
Yeah.
I got all my paperwork done, but in the meantime, some of the people who either heard me on podcasts or I talked to on the internet, reached out to me, knew I was stranded in London, were like, "Come hang out."
Sure.
I met a friend of mine, got way too drunk.
Yeah.
Mid-afternoon, while I was supposed to be doing this paperwork, and my luggage was in the embassy, because they, for some reason, will take your luggage without even looking at it. I was like, "Cool, great, hang on to it." And so I don't get back to the embassy in time. So I have no clothes. And I'm just wandering the streets of London. I go to an Airbnb. I come back to the embassy the next day with my paperwork first thing in the morning, and I just look disheveled.
Yeah.
And despite I get there first thing in the morning, it takes 3 hours to get through the line. I'm the last guy at the will call to get my papers in. They say, "Don't worry, come back in 3 hours, go home, have a shower, and come back. We'll have a passport for you." I'm like, "Oh, thank you so much." And so I go back to my Airbnb, and I had passed out on top of the sheets because I had been drinking, and with my shoes on the previous day, actually. And I had woken up a bit late because I had been drinking and had to hustle out. So I was gross. I was super gross.
Sure.
So I was elated, and I stood up and I took my shoes off. And the blood drained from my face, and I just, for whatever reason, it had clicked, and I picked them up, and I put them on top of my dresser, and I looked at them for about a second, and then I reached in, and I pulled my insole out, and there she was. She was right under my insole, and it was awful.
You absolutely could have not said that. Was there a moment where you thought, I'm just going to pretend that I lost it and not admit that it was in my shoe?
At that point, because I had travel documents and there was a good chance I'd get out on the next, like literally I caught the last possible plane to make it to the ETC in time the next morning. Because that felt pretty secure, and once I had recovered, it to me was just funny. It was because I didn't, cost. Although ironically enough, me not showing up to the ETC would have been the equivalent of me showing up to the ETC as far as team points were concerned. So it really didn't matter if I got that plane. But, if I had managed to lose my passport and miss the ETC for Team Canada, I would have gone to the grave with the passport in my shoe story, that's for sure.
Yeah, but
maybe my wife would get to hear it, but at that point to me it was just funny.
Yeah. And then so you went to ETC and you went 0-6 with Tau, and that was, you think you said the captain was about to kick you off the team midway through, or was it
So my good friend Conrad Motika was the coach of Team Canada, and I wouldn't say coming apart at the seams. But I did this thing where, I would, every single game, I re-upped, I settled down, I focused, I'd get to the table, I'd look at it, I'd think, okay, cool, this is what I got to do. I'd deploy, I'd step back from the table, and I'd go, I've lost. Immediately. I would have had made some sort of stupid mistake that I knew I shouldn't have done. And I just kept doing it. Actually kind of freaked myself out because I kept doing these things that were just to any outsider would have just been like, you're stupid. What are you doing? Yeah. And in my head, I was very carefully approaching each game from a place of calmness. And I said to my captain, I can't stop losing. And when I said that, and I suppose he saw the fear and panic in my eyes after that, I think it was the fourth game. No, it was actually after the third game. They warmed up Conrad. So they actually had a practice game where Conrad didn't get out of his movement phase. So one thing it did do for me was at least I'm not the worst Tau player available. There is one worse option because he'd never played the army once in his life. So, but he had actually. So one of the things was I felt like I was really screwed up. The thinking was he couldn't do any worse, and he'd come all that way to be the coach.
Sure.
If I had not made it, he would have actually had to play.
Yeah.
So my thinking was, hey man, give him a shot. If I'd known that guy since I was 10 years old. So if he can get in there and do something with it. But as he was trying to figure out Tau in roughly 12 hours, which believe it or not is rather difficult even for an Eldar player.
Yep.
I think he realized that, hey, maybe it's better that you go in. And I went in, and I think I scored my 4 points of the tournament somewhere after that. So I did get better.
Nice. Well, so I guess looking back on that entire ETC experience, now I've just had you relive the whole darn thing here on the podcast.
Don't worry, I'm laying down on the couch. This is very therapeutic.
I guess in a way, I mean, obviously it didn't turn out the way you wanted it, but it's a story, right?
Oh sure, yeah. No, I mean, come on, man. It's still
London.
It's minis. I think I went in there with the best of intentions. I did give it my all, and things just went terribly wrong. If that's the worst experience that I have, at least A, it's a bit funny.
Mm-hmm.
B, I mean, if I do really well, I don't know that Canada exactly wins the ETC last year. I think they're going to be good this year, though.
Yeah.
They're putting their team together well. Yeah. At any rate, I don't want to jinx them. I said my first order of business as a team vet was to disassociate myself entirely from the ETC team.
Yeah.
I honestly, if people want to make jokes and throw their passport in their shoe every time they travel to a tournament, which happens every time Canadians travel to a tournament.
Yep.
That's fine. I think it's funny,
and
also as a guy who clearly enjoys himself and his sense of self, it just feeds my ego. So that's great.
Yeah, you're still in the conversation,
right?
So having said all
clicks.
that, having said all that, and as we just sort of discussed a little bit of Tau, I mean, I posted this question to Sean: is Tau competitive? Do you think Tau is competitive right now in this meta? I mean, not 9 months ago, but right now, the way the meta exists right now, is it competitive?
Does competitive mean?
Let's say, could it? I don't know. Could it win a GT, like a 2-day event?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say it can win a GT. I think a 2-day, a 5-round.
Yeah.
Yes, I think, and it has. I mean, most of the Tau lists that have won those events have been kind of skew lists. You had the one, I think the Tau build that won the most was probably the Tiger Shark thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Which is now kind of out of the question. I think Tau, are matchup dependent, and if they happen to be playing in a meta where they don't run into a super hard counter and they've got a person who's very good at playing them, of course they can win.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of books though in that sort of all I need is a miracle type GT winning category. So if you look at their I don't know if you're a 40kstats.com guy.
Sure. Oh yeah, for sure.
So 40kstats.com, there's tournaments and winning position, which is something that our friend the Falcon keeps track of. Let's just pull this up. So this is all the Tau. Did we talk about this on the previous one?
No, keep going.
Sean, touch on this.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at the numbers here with Tau. So like TWIP is tournaments and winning position, which is a very simple stat. Essentially, it's armies that have gone 4-0 at a tournament. And the logic behind it is just that, you can look at my LVO record this year. I went 3-0, but I didn't exactly run into, Nick Nanavati in that 3-0, right?
You can dodge matchups in 3 games, pretty much. Yeah,
absolutely. Like anyone can win an RTT. Yeah, right. That's totally possible. Once you get to that 4th game, though, you're probably paired up in any tournament against another contender. Yeah, or at least someone who can play, and that's going to be your a hard cap right there. Yep. So if you win that 4th game, obviously by definition you would be in position to win that tournament because now if you're in a 5-rounder, you're probably on the top table or near it. And if you're at the LVO, you're 2 games away from top 8, whatever. So at any rate, that's kind of how that works. So if you look at something like Ynnari, so Ynnari have a field percentage, i.e., are taken in the field somewhere in the like 5-6% range, I believe. They have a TWIP percentage, so the percentage of those players that have taken Ynnari of 12.4%.
Nice. Okay.
So that means more than 1 in 10 Ynnari players actually go 4-0.
Yeah. So it's only taken 5% of the time, but in 12% of the instances, 12% of them are winning 4 games, which is at least 4 games. That's good. Okay.
And this is all this is basically from BAO to the LVO. This is what this data set is. This is the 2018 data set that they have. When we look at something like Tau, they're actually not too bad from that marker, right? So they have a field percentage of about 3.5%. So they were actually not taking too much. Chapter approved probably improved that a bit, but nonetheless, their TWIP was 7.8. So more than double their representation went 4-0, and that sounds about like the story of Tau. Yeah. Their actual amount of lists that went undefeated were 5. So that means that they either won or, tied for first or came close to being first. Yeah. So, they actually had a pretty good run. So are Tau competitive in the, sort of pre-LVO meta? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And just for my own, curiosity, which army has the highest TWIP? From BAO to LVO, what's highest percentage of TWIP? Assuming that it's obviously some armies just aren't taken very much, but of the armies that at least they're taken by, I don't know, at least 2% of the field. What's the highest TWIP right now? Or
highest TWIP was 14.2% for actual Astra Militarum, but they were 9% of the field. Yeah. So the ones that really crushed it are certainly things like Ynnari. So Ynnari, for example, as a faction. Let me pull them up. Their win percentage as a faction is almost 60%. They ended the year last year at 58%. And
yeah. Well, I think, and I have zero inside knowledge on this, but I just I don't think any Ynnari player is going to be. I just don't see that's going to last. I'm sure something will happen to Ynnari at some point. Our friend the Castellan and the Astra Militarum list, I can't imagine that those things won't be addressed either in the FAQ or in who knows what's in the future. But it's interesting. Tau feel like they're in a place where they're strong, but they're not strong enough that they have any kind of target on their head. So they could. They seem like they're above average, competitively speaking, and as other things start to fall around them, I feel like they could be just probably not quite like Dark Eldar. Dark Eldar feel like another sort of thing that you can compare to. Dark Eldar feel like they're stronger, but then they always have Eldar allies, so it's really tough to pull Dark Eldar out by themselves. But I feel like Tower, they're probably what Games Workshop would like all armies to be honest, in that they're doing well, but they're not dominating. Is that safe? You say?
I think, if we look at, that 2018 thing, because that's what we were looking at, let's see what their actual win rate was. I think it wasn't the greatest. Tau Empire. Well, no, they're sitting right at 50%. So that's probably, and they're, obviously they have no allies.
Yep.
So they had 50.14%. But I think the, Tau players moved away from them over time. And this doesn't factor in a lot of the benefits that they got from chapter approved. Yeah. So like when you look at the sort of the current stats, how have Tau done? Their win percentage has improved. Obviously, this is going to be less games, but shockingly not too many less because there's been a wild amount of tournaments even since LVO in the stats. But they've won 51.75% of their games since LVO, including LVO, and since then. Tau Empire. So they are taken. So they've gone way up in their field percentage. They're almost 7% of the field. 3.37% of that field have made it to 4-0. So they're actually doing a little bit worse from the T-whip angle. But there's actually, although there's been a lot of players, there maybe hasn't necessarily been like as many tournaments in the data. Yeah,
it's what's interesting about the data, and one of the things that I've always it doesn't always take into consideration the player skill. So it's sometimes it's hard to look at it kind of in a vacuum because you just don't, like, maybe Tau people abandoned Tau because they weren't doing so well, and then chapter approved and a bunch of people jumped back on Tau, and so maybe that's throwing off their, or the ones that are still playing are the dedicated Tau players that are going to make it work no matter what. So it's hard to know exactly, because actually, 3 to 5% of people taking Tau, it's quite low compared to, their heyday, I think, when in 7th or 6th edition. So
yeah. And also, how do you draw that, right? Because there's a lot of detachments of, Riptides with Eldar and whatever. But I mean, 7% is a pretty decent slice of the meta.
Oh, 7, yeah. Oh, it's gone up to 7. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's 6.85%. So like, bad. There's like a fair amount of Tau players. No one has won an event with them, from the LVO and onwards. Again, there may not have been that many events to have won. I mean, in all of these lists in total, we're looking at, one sec here, you're looking at 16 undefeated lists since the LVO, or including LVO. So, I mean, not surprising that Tau hasn't, just by the numbers come out on top. Yeah. But if you're asking me, is it possible to win with Tau? I'd say possible, absolutely. Yeah. There's definitely, there's a Tau player in the top 8. He ran a Viorla detachment. I don't know if Sean touched on that, with the Devilfish and some, sort of utility dudes jumping out and clearly moving around the table, or maybe not, maybe just hiding characters. Don't know exactly what he did. But his list is worth looking at because it's actually outside of that. I think it's Riptides and Shield Drones, and then he's got his little unique thing. He brought the there's a Kroot character from Blackstone Fortress, maybe. Oh, yep. He 20-point elite guy, yep. Yeah, randomly brought that dude. So like he had, definitely some tools in his list, and he got through to the top 8 with it. And Tau actually, I'm pretty sure, has always made top 8 in the LVO, at least as long as I've been watching. Yeah. So there you go. I guess as far as you personally, though, whether they're competitive or not, what does Tau need? Like, for you to sort of, you kind of talk about the Codex being a little bit unfinished. Mm-hmm. Does it feel like it's lost a little bit of its more of its flavor, or are there things that you think that Tau just need to make it a little more of an interesting army for you personally? Yeah, I would love to see them, have the most significant trick that they lost from 7th to 8th, which was move, shoot, jump. Mm-hmm. I think if their suits had the ability to have a free move, get out of the way, hide, do whatever they have to do, maybe get out of range or jump behind a wall, whatever, or just go get an objective. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that would make a big difference for not just their competitiveness, but also the dynamicness of playing them. Yeah. You would have a lot more opportunities to move around. Something that happens right now is that, they do tend to be played static. Is it the best way to play them? I don't know. Clearly I'm not an expert on how to play Tau well. But I do feel like, for me, if they would be certainly a lot more appealing if the suits weren't just, bigger, tougher fire warriors, if they actually had a dynamic range to them. And, everyone wants crisis suits to be good. They were bad in 7th, too. My crisis suits didn't even have weapons in 7th. I just ran them as solo dudes with fists. Just to fill out just to fill out slots. So, that they're the Tau, I feel, I don't know if they're recognized as something that could really use, a revisit on its book or not, because I think at a casual level, they're still probably viewed as a big bad and as an oppressive list. Whereas, from a competitive view, they do feel like they'll eventually come up short in most tournaments. And I think that's played out in the numbers too.
Yeah, fair enough. And so you sent me a photo of all your Tau. How much Tau do you own right now? It was a lot. It was a table worth of.
It's a pathological amount of painted Tau, all done up by my friend at Battle Brothers Painting. Plug.
Yeah.
It's I've got at least 140 Fire Warriors. I've got one of significant suit. I've got 2 Yavaras. I've got 3 Riptides. I've got 2 Storm Surges. I've got 6 Broadsides. I had a Piranha Firewing, Piranha, whatever that was called.
Oh, yeah.
So
they
I
can
had
refuel and come back. Yeah, the drones.
Oh, that was so much fun. I used to love it. So as a result, I've got tons of drones. I've got Pathfinder. I've got just about everything. I don't have sniper drones, I do, but I sold 9 of them to Sean Morgan.
Oh, that's where he got his sniper drones from. I see. Yeah.
I actually have to mail those to him. He gave him the money, and I was like, "How soon do you need these?" I'm so lazy. Because Tau, I will reveal to you, are the first army I've ever put in actual storage. So they are in a box, a very large box, well packaged, in my storage locker for the moment, because I am having a blast with orcs, and we just needed some time.
It's okay to sort of step away from an army. I mean, I stepped away from Eldar. I used to run Eldar forever, and it's not because I don't like Eldar. I love Eldar, but sometimes you need something different. And orcs are definitely a dynamic army. I mean, that's to talk about like a movement thing. They've got a lot of just intensity about them. So yeah.
And I think this also comes down to playstyle. I think I really enjoyed. So a lot of the Tau lists that I built once I got comfortable with them were things that, I either moved towards what I wanted to do, or I brought action to the opponent. Whether or not it worked out for me was beside the point. I had a lot of fun. Yeah. There was a lot of cool stuff you could do with Piranhas and the Rapid Insertion Force, or whatever hilarious double entendre name it had. But nowadays I find it harder to do that. I find that there's a lot of the models that I own, and I own a lot of models that are just outside of a casual game where they're going to nuke things too much. Yeah. They're not fun, and even when they're on the table, they suffer movement penalties and all these things. It just feels punitive. Yeah. So. I'm not saying that, if you're a Tau player, that you should also put your stuff in storage. I have a very unique and tragic story, and I have good reason to have done it. But I think, with 40K, even if you aren't satisfied with your army, if you have, painted models, don't necessarily just put them up on eBay because, you don't like the rules or how things are going. Put them down for a little bit, and it'll come around, man.
Yeah.
A lot of my orcs I had when I was 10 or 12 years old. Those things sat in boxes and in a basement for a long time when I wasn't playing the game. And now they get regular use. So things come around.
They do. They always do. And that's especially with this edition, things are spinning much, much quicker. So I don't think I'd ever get rid of a painted miniature. I don't even care what it is. There's just, because you just don't know. You just don't know.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely.
All right, Val. Well, hopefully, actually, if you're enjoying your works, that's awesome too. But I want to bring you on and have a different perspective on Tau, and your story was just too good to share, too good not to share. So,
enough time has passed.
Yeah, time has passed.
Funny now. It's less tender. Mark, but
it's less tender.
That's fine. And I hope I don't sound like a guy who's whining about Tau. And there's lots of people who I'm sure think Tau are still the enemy. And in a lot of scenarios they're gonna just nuke people a lot of the time. And they do have lots of efficiencies. And I'm sure my man Sean Morgan touched on a lot of those good points.
He definitely did. And I think that's I guess it always comes back to everything in 40K is that you just play the army that you like. And Tau look good, and if you love the aesthetic of Tau, then you just go all in because they're cool. So
and if I think Tau also, because a lot of things just didn't get tried. Look at that LVO list and just have a look at some of the decisions that were made there. That was not an off the shelf list. Yes, it has a lot of the same tropes and core pieces, but where a lot of lists are made in the margins and the choices you make there. And I think there's lots of room for experimentation with Tau in that respect. And look at what they're really good at, try and capitalize on their what they're really efficient at, and solve for your problems, and then ideally duck your worst matchup.
Excellent. Yeah, good advice for pretty much any army, but definitely for Tau. All right, Val, thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Hey, my pleasure, and it was great chatting with you. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so that is Mr. Val Heffelfinger. Hopefully you enjoyed his interview, and I think that's the first time we've actually had him on the podcast, although he is on a lot of podcasts. He's the perennial podcast host. I'll hope to have him on again. So that was Val Heffelfinger. So before we jump into our own discussion of Tau, let's hear a word from our sponsor, Trader A. If you're like most Warhammer players, you own a ton of models. At one time, you had big plans for these models, but now they just kind of sit, gathering dust, unused and unloved. It's time to clean out your closet of shame. Visit TraderA.com and get cash for your used models. Trader A is run by Captain A, someone who's been in the community a long time and has done a lot to grow the hobby. He's also a personal friend of the show. Unopened boxes, models on a sprue, half-built models, primed, painted, even bits have value. The process is simple. Send him a list of what you have. He'll send you a quote. You pack it up, send in your stuff, and he'll get you cash. You can shop around, but you're going to find that Trader A gives you 40% more than the other guys. You want it quick? You want to get rid of it? Visit TraderA.com. Get cash to buy the stuff that you really want. TraderA.com. Sell your models and get your cash quick and easy. Let's finish out our discussion of Tau. So we have a couple lists that we want to discuss. And Sean, go ahead and talk about your first list there.
So this is a list that I played against at LVO. I played against it being piloted by Jeff Poole.
Jeff Poole, yeah.
Jeff is an awesome guy. It's a really good list. I was very impressed. When we got done talking about it, it was one of those things where when we're trying to figure out, okay, what really was the turning point in the game, it wasn't anything about his list. It was just, he had identified one mistake that he couldn't make in the game, and then he made that mistake. Like, he shot my Bullgren.
Yeah.
He was shooting my Bullgren and not everything else.
Yeah.
So after he was like, I said that I shouldn't shoot the Bullgren, and then I did.
Yeah.
So I think it came down to a little bit of, he was still working on playing the list, getting it built into his instincts of knowing exactly what to do when.
And Jeff played Eldar against you, Matt, in the LVO before. He's played lots of different armies. So this is obviously he likes to look at different armies, and this is
and I think I really liked a lot of the tools that it has. So it's a pretty general list. It matches a lot of what we were talking about yesterday. But it does have one twist on it that I don't know, maybe it's more common than I think, but I wanted to point this out. So it is generally a double battalion and then a vanguard, and it's all Tau.
Okay.
I think. Sorry. So the vanguard is Sakea. That makes more sense.
Yep,
so it's a double Tau battalion, and then a Sakea vanguard. And the first battalion is a Cadre Fireblade, a Cold Star battlesuit with 4 missile pods, 3 strike teams of 5 fire warriors, Dayak Grek, which is a 20-point elite's choice.
Yep, the Coupe model, yep.
And then 2 Ripsides with 2 smart missiles, counter-fire defense system, heavy burst cannon, and velocity tracker.
Yep.
And then this is the twist that I liked. 2 units of gun drones, 10-man strong, and then a 12-man shield drone unit. And then a unit of broadsides, all with missiles. So missile sides. They're a very good choice.
Yep.
The second battalion was another Cold Star. This one had the air-bursting fragmentation projector.
Interesting.
Which is that flamer we were talking about.
Yeah.
And then a drone controller and 2 times flamers.
To go with all those gun drones.
Yep. And then Dark Strider. And then 3 strike teams, 5-man strike teams. And then your Sakea, where an ethereal 3 Farsights.
Farsight marksmen, yeah.
Yeah. So the reason why I like this list, it's got the Riptides. It's got all the character support you need. It has all the marker light support you need. But then I really like the gun drones. They put out a lot more fire than I thought they would.
Yeah.
Between the commander and then some of the other benefits you're able to give them.
Yeah.
They hit a lot. They just dropped down and cleared out all of my infantry.
Really?
Much on that side of the table where they hit. And then the other cool thing that he was doing was by moving his fire base when he needed to, he was actually able to move it towards where the gun drones came in.
Yeah.
So he made a little bit of a mistake on positioning and ended up having one of his Riptides not be able to get the drones, which was a big thing. But it was kind of, the shield drones were there to protect for a few turns. Yeah. And then once the shield drones were all chipped away, the gun drones came in, killed something, and then became the next group of drones.
So the
and
gun
by
drones
deep striking in, you didn't have access to kill them earlier.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where he made sure that he had drones. He got offensive value out of it.
Yeah.
And then also it allowed his list to kind of be a little bit more mobile and moving around the table and trying to position itself to apply power.
So he can kind of clear like a little drop zone and then move his big headers in behind that. And then they can kind of, yeah. And that's, I saw that with the Tau player I played, is that it was very much like they sit in the castle, but then they have like a space to go to, like a second section of the board where they move to with the Bonka. So it's actually, Tau they feel static, but they don't have to be. And I like that. So, all right, Matt, what do you got?
Okay. So, in the first part of our Tau coverage, we talked about how, I mean, if the enemy is that close to you that they're shooting your, shooting your character, something has gone terribly wrong.
And we had questions.
Yeah, we had questions. I made a Tau list where you go towards the enemy. Hold on. Don't turn this off yet. Okay. This is not completely crazy. This could work. I mean, I have no plans on testing it out at all. But I think there is something to be said about kind of switching up what Tau we usually see Tau do. So I have a Borkan battalion. I have 2 battalions and a mixed, I think it's a vanguard. So the first battalion is Borkan with 2 cadre fireblades, because the extra 6 inches to a marker light is pretty
kind
nice.
of necessary. Yeah.
It's on 2s.
Yeah, that seems good.
Not the worst. Then I got 3 breacher teams, 10 strong in each, and they have 3 devilfish with them. Okay? And remember, breachers are the ones that want to get close to you because their gun, the closer it gets, the better it is. So at 15 inches, it's strength 4. At 10 inches, it's strength 5 neg 1. It's at 5 inches, it's strength 6 neg 2. But if you're Borkan, okay, that's 11 inches. It's strength 6 neg 2.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, clever. Okay.
So you move them up in that in the old devilfish and kind of get them out. It'd be probably more of a turn 2 army type thing. But oh, brother, that would be nasty. That many strength 6, because each one of them has 2 shots.
Yeah,
so that's 20 strength 6 neg 2 shots.
Oh,
hitting on 4s, rerolling 1s.
Yeah. And so you have I'm sorry, how big are the breacher teams?
10
each,
strong.
10 each, and all the devilfish. Yeah,
and
cool.
all the devilfish, and they're just big enough so that some characters can
sneak in,
hop in, and rolling in kind of behind those devilfish is a Yavara battlesuit. That's the flamer one.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he's no joke. He has 9 shield drones with him to help kind of keep him alive. Because remember, shield drones can move really fast. We don't know that.
Yeah,
because we never see them move.
You never see them have to, but they do. Yeah.
But they can move really, really fast. And all those devilfish all have smart missile systems on them. And they're only, even with the smart missile systems, they're only 108 points.
Yeah.
So that's so much value there.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah, that's
with
good.
A burst cannon and 2 smart missile systems.
And 12 wounds.
T7 with fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, compare that to a Razorback.
Yeah.
That's a lot of value for that vehicle.
Yep.
Then next I have a Tau battalion with a cadre fireblade, an ethereal, 3 minimum strike teams, fire warrior strike teams, a standard Riptide, just to hold the backfield. He has 9 shield drones with him as well. But here comes the fun stuff. Okay, a mixed vanguard. I'll tell you what the elite choices are first, because they're pretty standard. There's 3 Firesight marksmen that make them Sakai, so they can use that awesome strat that just does the splash damage. The splash damage marker light, and they will have access to that because there's another Tau detachment that is unlocking all the stratagems. But in the 2 HQ spots, I have Mr. Commander Farsight himself and a Commander Crisis battlesuit with the Iridium battlesuit, so he has a 2-up armor, and he has the Fusion Blade relic.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So you have two commanders that kind of move up with the Devilfish, so the Devilfish can block him, and the Shield Drones can block him, and the Yavari can block him.
Yep.
And they are probably better at countercharging, but they can go in and do work, because Farsight, I don't think we talked about this. Farsight, hits on 2s, re-rolling 1s.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we did mention that.
He hits on 2s in combat.
Yeah.
And he is strength 8, neg 4.
Yeah.
D3 damage.
And he has a 4-up invul, does he not?
It's just the D3 that makes me sad about that. Everything else is amazing. D3 is...
If it was flat 3, I mean, we'd be...
If it was flat 2, I would be a lot more excited, actually.
Yeah. But
and he has his plasma rifle is no joke either. It's 30-inch range. It's rapid fire, 1 strength, 6 neg 4 flat 2 damage. I mean, he's a boss, and he's only 125 points. And his commander suit buddy has the double. It's like the fusion blades.
Yep.
They are strength 8, neg 4, d6 damage.
Yep.
And you can give him the shield generator for an invul save as well.
Yeah, and he has a 2-up. Well, I give him both, probably a little bit greedy. I gave him both the Iridium Crisis suit that gives him a 2-up armor and a 4-up invul.
Yep.
So, I mean, you probably don't need both of those, but hey.
If he's going to be in close combat, he might as well get something because he's going to get a lot of attacks back.
Yeah, I think the invul is important.
Yeah.
The more important of those two.
Yeah,
probably.
But the 2+ is useful.
Yeah, and those two commanders kind of scoot up with those devilfish, with the Avara, kind of block it out a little bit. They are tough enough to where snipers, well, even if they do get hit by snipers, there's shield drones right there.
Yeah.
So the shield drones can jump in, but it seems like it's fun. It would move out. It would be a moving Tau list. I'm not sure how good it would be, but it seems fun.
I agree. I like that. And it's funny because if you think of like the devilfish, so wave serpents with guardians in it. Guardians, they're strength 4, but they have rending, which is pretty good, and they need to kind of doom to work. But that's out of the box. You don't necessarily need to even worry about getting the Rend 3. The strength 6 at 11 inches is really, really nasty.
Yeah.
The only bad thing is that the +1 shot that Fire Warriors get from Farsight,
Darkstrider.
Not from Darkstrider. He lets
Fireblade.
the Cadre Fireblade.
Yeah.
Does not work on the Breacher's gun.
Yep.
It only works on the. It only works. It works on the Fire Warriors gun and a couple other ones, but. Man, that'd be cool though. They get an extra shot like that. You'd actually see Tau like moving up and having maybe breachers that move forward instead of just, let's stay right here, guys.
And they're clearing space. Yeah. So
and one of the reasons why I love it is that it's a return of the Fish of Fury.
Yeah.
Which was what Tau was. Yeah. When it first came out in a lot of ways. It was the devilfish loaded with Fire Warriors that would run around, and of course you can't do quite what they were doing back then, which was hopping out behind the vehicle and getting a cover save for being obscured by it. But, you know, I mean...
The only problem with building lists with Tau I found is that the Tau-focused fire strat is so darn good. The Tau Sept. It's 3 CP, but it's so good that it's really hard to build something that's not. That does not have access to that because that thing is just so freaking good.
Yeah.
If you're going to spend it though, you want your whole, you need your, most of your shooting to be benefiting. From it.
Yeah.
So, and with using breachers, there is an okay stratagem. Okay. We talked about how there's last episode.
There's some very good ones and then there's a bunch of just,
there's ones that you're like, okay. There's one for breachers. Thankfully, it's only 1 CP. Shooting phase before a breacher team from your army shoots at an enemy that is receiving the benefit of cover.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's your qualifier that is kind of this unit that you target has to be in cover.
Sure.
The breacher team rerolls failed wound rolls against that enemy unit until the end of the phase. Not bad.
No, not really. I mean,
not bad for 1 CP, but there's. Yeah.
Because it could go after just the little 5, scouts and just little junky things.
But if one scout is out,
they
will not receive the benefit of cover. The entire unit needs to be
slightly annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at least they can go into buildings and clear. So I came up with a list, and it was so funny because we were talking about Farsight trying to make melee Tau work, and I think it must have stuck in both our heads because the list I came up with has three Vanguards because I'm just like, the heck with CP, I don't need it. The first one is the Farsight Enclave's Vanguard. It has Commander Farsight. I have a Riptide and 2 units of hazard support teams, and hazard support teams are those Forge World suits.
Super good.
And it's expensive because if you take 3 of them with advanced targetings and 4 shield drones, or you could do 4 gun drones, either way, it's 274 points, which is about the same, slightly less than a Riptide. But in the elite slot, I have 2 of those units of hazards, so 6 of those, and then a Riptide. So that's 1 Vanguard.
Okay.
Oh, and then 5 shield drones to go with the Riptide. The second Vanguard is the Borkan Sept with 2 Cadre Fireblades, 3 fire sight marksmen, and then sniper drones. I have a unit of 8 sniper drones and a unit of 7 sniper drones. And the problem with Tau is they don't have a real good source of mortal wound output. So things like Bulgrins, for example, or anything with the crazy saves, and they don't have access to something like anything to kind of reduce the save, so they have to just volume firepower, but a Bulgrin is always going to get a 2 up if it's, got all the stuff up. So I kind of think sniper drones are kind of important in Tau lists.
Yeah.
So there's a little tiny piece that kind of sits back and shoots. The next Vanguard is the Commander and the Cold Star with the 2 fusion blades, kind of like what you have with the shield generator. Dayak, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then a Riptide unit, another Riptide.
The named Kroot.
The named Kroot, because he's a 20-point elite slot.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then a unit of stealth battle suits and then shield drones. So the idea here is you have your stealth battle suits that can pretty much go whatever, but the idea is a lot like what you talked about, is that you can deep strike or keep them on the board, those hazard support teams, and clear a space to kind of move things in, and Farsight and the Commander serve as countercharge units. So you have a little mini castle in the corner to start with, but you can move to another spot to kind of do damage on. So I just would like Tau to be more of a move army, and I know that the better players play it. To me, I think that would be super fun. That's how I would want to play it.
Yeah.
Because right now, the typical build you see, I don't have it out in front of me, but I mean, I can tell you it's two Tau set battalions.
Yep.
There's three Cadre Fireblades in there as the HQ, plus Commander Shadow Sun. So there's your 4 HQs you need for 2 battalions. You got 30 Fire Warriors about. Okay, for that's 6 squads of 5. Then you have 2, maybe 3 Riptides, depending on the person. You have a bunch of shield drones. And then there's a Vanguard with the Ethereal and the 3 Farsight marksmen.
Yep.
Yeah. The Farsight.
Firesight marksman.
Firesight marksman. That's right.
Feels like it's,
Yeah, it's pretty close. And there's about 400 points in there that you get to wiggle with, maybe like 350.
Just for funsies, So I want to go broadsides, but I want to go the hazard suits, right? Yeah.
So, I mean, there's your wiggle room, is that 400 points, but that other 1,600 points is pretty much locked.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point.
Which you saw on Jeff Pool's list.
Yep.
And like
Very much
I said,
so.
that was very much here's what's being run.
The classic Tau list. And by the way, it's a good list. I mean, it's very good. It's vicious, and if you're not used to it, the amount of firepower can delete like a knight. I hate to say knight a turn, but it can delete a big thing a turn. Every turn it deletes one big thing. So that's really what Tau did.
And usually when you see that many Fire Warriors, Dark Striders in there somewhere, because Dark Strider just really, really, really helps them. There's drones that they can take that reduce that. Have like rapid fire distance. I forget the name of the drones that gives them that bubble or something like that. Yeah. But the problem is that it doesn't move. I mean, that list doesn't move. And in Warhammer 40,000, there are 2 ways of playing. There's 2 things currently to, get points in games, and that's capture an objective and kill something. Tau do really well at the killing something thing. As far as getting somewhere to capture something, it's been a problem. That's kind of why they struggle a lot of the time.
I actually kind of think Eldar play has a lot to inform Tau play, where Eldar they rely on a lot of movement and they rely on a lot of synergies, just like Tau. But Eldar can capture objectives. They can't hold them, but that's okay. They only need to be there for the turn they need them to be there, and then they kind of move off. But I think that you could play Tau beyond just a gun line for sure. One of the things that is interesting, though, with Gene Stealer Cult, with things that are coming out of the ground and getting really close. So that Tau feel like they might struggle with a lot of deep striking assault units that can get into combat, which I think that's why you're seeing Devilfishes, because charge the Devilfish and you might kill it, but my guys are just going to pop back behind it. But Also, you see what's the signature system where you can intercept with
Early warning override.
The early warning override a lot on Riptides because they need to have them out front, but it's only 12 inches, so it's a little dicey there. But you're seeing a lot of that shifting more to that intercept. If you're going to sit in a castle, you need something to protect against stuff that's in your grill turn 1, basically, or turn 2.
That would be. I mean, that would be I don't think that's going to work. To be fair, because these things that have the early warning override systems, they are wrapped in bubble wrap.
Yeah,
right? They're wrapped.
They have to be out front to
make it work. Be out front.
Yep.
If you have a Riptide sitting out front without any bubble wrap, it's not the best thing in the world because you'll be able to intercept that first thing, but that second and third thing that comes down because Gene Stealer Cult doesn't just have one thing that pops up; they have 3 or 4. Sometimes it will. Yeah, it'll be an issue. I put an early warning override on my Yavara, that flamer.
Yeah,
that would be brutal.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
To eat that in the face, especially because it's all auto hitting.
Yeah,
and you can overcharge those things to where it's really like aberrants would just melt to it. If they shot at aberrants, but
it's that's true.
And for one last perspective, the list that took number 6 at LVO included 2 units of Kroot. Just thought I'd throw that out
just
there.
Just for extreme bubble wrap.
Yeah,
like just
18 Kroot carnivores and 15 Kroot carnivores made the list.
How much is a Kroot cost?
They're cheap.
Let's see, 18 of them was 90 points, so 5 points.
Wow.
Yeah. cheap.
That is
cheap.
But they have that pre-game move forward.
Oh, so they extend the bubble wrap.
Yeah, that's why they were there.
They extend it and they can they have obsec so they can go grab objectives and things like that.
Yeah. It also had a 10-man breacher team.
Mm-hmm. Woo! Nice.
In a devilfish.
Nice.
So that was the only devilfish in there, but it did have that.
Yeah.
And then it also had Unshi, who is a 60-point. I think he is a named ethereal, right?
That's on Va.
Okay.
I think Unshi's is a named cadre fireblade or like
maybe
like a special.
Yeah, and then with the Warlord Trait Academy Luminary, which just looking at the math on command points, I'm pretty sure that's a free command point.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, because he has 15 command points listed with 2 battalions and a vanguard.
Oh.
So he's picking up a free
extra
command point somewhere,
yeah.
so I'm guessing it's there.
Yeah.
But yeah, just thought I'd. Oh, and then 10 Pathfinders as well made this list as well.
Good to see
so, and then the real core of the list is a vanguard with a commander and 3 Riptides.
Yep. Yeah, the classics.
Yep,
it's good stuff.
You are right. It's a named. It's another named ethereal that's for the Viorla Sept.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And she's not a slouch in close combat. That is for sure.
Yeah, he ran a Viorla Sept with Anchi, Cadre Fireblade, 10 Breacher team, or 10-man, 2 5-man striker teams, a Pathfinder team, and that Devilfish.
Huh.
Next to his Tau battalion and his, so he was not running a Sakea Sept.
Interesting.
Vanguard.
He was assuming people were going to get in close to him, I guess, or he was going to move forward. Nice.
Yeah. Interesting list.
Nice.
I like it.
Yeah, I don't like any Tau list where you basically sit in a corner and hope they come to you.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I hate that idea.
I've worked the list out of my system, the flowchart list, which is what I look at.
Yeah.
A lot of Tau is played as.
Yeah.
Can I shoot it off the table? Yes. Okay, I won the game. Yeah. Can I shoot it off the table? No. Well, I lost the game.
Yeah. I think they need some interesting things. It's cool to see more stuff coming out and because Tau have not been touched really much in any FAQ, they haven't been adjusted. Their points have gone down on some things, but they've not gone up since the last chapter approved. And as other things kind of get adjusted around them, I think they're a good army. They're up there. I mean, you can compete with them, obviously. I think at the last Warhammer Heat event, it was taken by a Tau army as well. So there's a lot of play, I think, with Tau. So, but I think like a lot of armies, the first things that jump out at you are what everyone starts to gravitate towards. But then as people dig, they start to find more of these hidden gems.
Yep.
So let's talk about getting started with Tau. Tau are, well, I mean, there is no cheap army in 40K, but Tau are fairly expensive if you're going to go suit heavy. I mean, Riptide is what, $80 or something?
Somewhere around
that
there,
is expensive.
Try to get them used.
Yeah.
There's a lot of used Riptides out there.
There's a lot of used Riptides out there. And Tau,
there's some of the more expensive pieces outside of the characters. Buying that many characters is expensive as well.
I mean, a single broadside model is $50.
Yeah.
So
is it really?
Yeah. There's like 40. It's expensive.
Yeah,
They're spendy.
I haven't looked at them in a long time.
Tau, the best box set they had was several editions ago where they had the Riptide and 6 Broadside. That was a really, really good value, but you haven't seen something like that in a while.
Oh yeah, that was like the first formation.
Yep.
That's where it all started going. Started going downhill when they had that first formation for Tau.
First formation. But I think Tau are like a lot of 40K. I mean, it's fairly expensive. How to get started with them, I think it really just depends on exactly what it is that suits you. The get started boxes are always really good because you'll need an Ethereal, need Fire Warriors, or you'll want to at least play with Fire Warriors. Yeah. From there, all of the units that we kind of mentioned are all pretty good, but to get a Tau forced together does take some effort. You've got to collect a lot of stuff.
I would encourage anybody that wants to start Tau to look at the different Septs and kind of identify how do you want to go with it. Because the Viola Sept is more of the Kroot and the Vespids and things like that. I think is it Viola? Oh, it's Dalek.
Yeah.
That's more that. If that's the way you want to go, focus on the Kroot, the Vespids, even though those models they're direct order and they're awful.
I cannot recommend them.
Yeah, they're like the start of the Finecast, so they were just real bad.
They were built,
Yeah, so I've seen some pretty cool conversions, but that would be one way to go if you're more interested in the suits. Obviously, you can get crisis suits used pretty easily.
There's actually a really good, healthy, robust, like used market for Tau. Like you go to eBay, you can see a ton of Tau armies. I think people, I don't know for sure, but I think people, when they first get into 40K, Tau have a really classic aesthetic of like mecha. And this is just my theory. A lot of people start off in the game, they go in, they say, ooh, I think Tau look good. They build an army. And then if they're going to get out of 40K, they get out of 40K because maybe it just didn't stick with them, but then they go and they sell the stuff on eBay. Yeah. I think Tau and Space Marines as well, but Tau, there is a lot of used stuff out there.
Obviously, Fire Warriors are a good investment. Obviously, the HQs. So those Battle Force or Get Started boxes are worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it just, like you said, it depends on what you want to do. Do you want to run more of a Castle Tau? Do you want to run a little more movement Tau? The easiest way to play Tau, I think, is to build your little castle force of like 1,000 points with like a Riptide and some stuff and just practice the sequence of like, okay, I shoot here, I put a marker light on here, then I shoot this. And there's a sequence of things you have to learn when you're playing Tau. And once you have that down, then you can kind of start expanding out to movement. And they're actually not a horrible army to learn with because your first thing you learn is target priority. Then you have to look at movement and then they kind of build. That you can sort of kind of learn to grow with the army as you expand.
That's a fair characterization. They're fairly easy to learn right off the bat. I mean, they're hard to master.
Yeah.
But they're easy to learn.
Yeah.
And you'll get a really good grasp on 2.5 phases of the game.
2.5.
Yeah. You'll have those phases down.
You'll have them down. Yeah. And then eventually you're going to have to start moving around, and I think that's where the fun stuff comes in. I don't know. I think that the units themselves, if you like Tau, then I would Crisis Suits. I don't know if I would go with Crisis Suits. I think definitely with Tau, you want Fire Warriors and you want a Riptide to start with. You get your first Riptide, maybe learn a little bit about it, do some work on how to magnetize it because you're going to have to do a little bit of construction building on it. Figure out how you want to magnetize that thing and then build your first.
It's not that hard, though.
It's not hard. There's a lot of sockets and stuff to it, but if you're fairly new, it's going to be kind of somewhat intimidating, but once you build the Riptide to really good standard and you've kind of magged it out, then from there everything else kind of becomes easy. So I think you buy a Riptide as one of your first purchases to start to work on.
And anybody thinking about starting Tau, please do not let any naysayers such as us at the in the middle part of the last podcast kind of deter you from playing Tau.
Yeah.
Okay. Tau of what is the saying we always use? Tau's been in the penalty box a little bit.
Yeah.
From 7th edition because there was some feel bads in 7th edition with Tau. They were a bit. There was one formation that was a bit too much.
Oh, yeah.
That was everywhere, and you would walk up to a table and see 3 Riptides and just have this sinking feeling. The same thing with Eldar and Warp Spiders. Like Warp Spiders are in the penalty box for an entire edition. Because they were such problem children in 7th edition that they need to go away for a little while.
Scatterbikes too.
Scatterbikes, yeah, yeah. They got taken away from the troop role, which is so sad. Yeah, I miss them as troops. OBSEC bikes that can move 48 inches a turn.
Yeah, my heart bleeds for you. It really does, Matt. It totally does.
But if you like the Army, please play the Army. Please do not let the naysayers steer you away. There are ways of playing Tau that people will be just fine with. You don't have to play the 3 Riptides.
Well, and I think that there's a holdover from other editions where there were just things that were so much better than everything else. Those things exist in this edition, right? But I think they get addressed eventually. So if you're banking on going for 2 years of this awesome thing that's always going to be good, the Castellan, for example, I think the Castellan, I'm not sure, but something will happen with the Castellan. So I don't think the Castellan was always going to be the dominating force it is. There's some things that in the game right now that are just so darn good that the GW is paying attention now, and you will see them addressed.
If it's meta-defining in a bad way, they don't want it.
Yep.
It doesn't really matter what it is.
Yeah.
If it is completely determining meta around it, they get rid of it.
Yeah. Or they tweak it or they adjust it. So who knows what will happen? I think we're saying the Castellan just because it is literally the there was so many Castellan.
One model.
I took one.
It's the low hanging fruit.
It's the
low hanging fruit.
It is absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of things that make the Castellan work that they could address, infantry squads and things like that. But the Castellan itself is just such an easy target to say, okay, that thing is overpowered.
Well, in 7th edition, I don't think anybody will argue that it was so skewed towards the shooting and the psychic phase.
Yes.
If you could not really do well with an assault army unless you had 45 Fenrisian wolves with you.
With Azrael.
They had Death Stars. They had to be unkillable.
They had to be Death Stars. They had to have 2-up rerollable invols with 5-up feel no pains.
Yeah.
And it was cancer. I mean, it made a lot of people quit the game.
Yep.
Tau's becoming a lot more accepted, I feel.
Yep.
As 8th edition is going on because it's more balanced.
Yep. I think so. And I think also, if the 40K universe is an ecosystem, I think Tau definitely need to be there. They need to have an army that just shoots the crap out of everybody because it tends to balance other things out as well. And I don't know. I like I said, I like them and they have a kind of an interesting, unique look. I think because they are different, as we discussed in the last podcast, they're kind of a different feel. And they were kind of packaged as something slightly different from the rest of the Grimdark. There was always kind of that like, oh man, what is this? This is not fitting the 40K universe. But I think they have built Tau to be a little more sinister than perhaps they first came out with. So
I want that book about the internal political philosophy of the Tau because it's going to be dark and authoritarian and brutal. And I want to read it.
I think that wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah. And last point. No matter what army you pick in 40K, there's going to be somebody that gives you crap about it.
Yeah.
That's really what, and it's not your army, it's those people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you're playing Tau and you're just having fun and somebody comes up to you and goes, Tau! Yeah. Well, that's because they're going to find something to say about your army, right? Like,
that is
don't
true.
worry about it.
There's no such thing as being a purist. You play what you like. If it's in the rules, it's in the rules and you play it. So awesome. And that is all we have for our show about Tau. So I think we have covered Tau pretty well. I think it's been pretty good. So if you are interested in Tau, and if you're interested in chatting a little more about like some lists or things you want to talk about, we love to hear from our listeners. So feel free to message us on Facebook or you can email us at thebattlehosts@gmail.com. If you'd like to support us, you can help us in a few different ways. You can tell your friends about us and like us on Facebook. You can leave us a review on iTunes. It does help to boost our listening audience. Finally, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thebattlehosts. For as little as $1 a month, you can help us with the cost to run this show and staying engaged with the community. And for $3 a month, you get access to our Discord chat. So the Discord chat is just now taking off right now. Hopefully,
already some good discussion.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get some more people in there to start chatting more stuff. So that is it for our show. Thanks for listening to Battle Hosts.
Remember to be a better gamer
and build a better space communism.
Nice. Good night.
Those Canadians, they can't say no to anybody. They're just so polite.
Yeah, that too.